Environment Committee launched a report into electric vehicle infrastructure, which calls upon the Mayor to take a pan-London approach to adding more charge points across London. It's a very positive sign to see that the Mayor is assembling a task force to look at this issue. The Health Committee has launched a report into young onset dementia, which flags the challenges faced by young people with dementia. The report calls on the Mayor to include them in his plans to make London a dementia-friendly city. Also, of vital importance to Londoners is the performance of the Tube network. At its most recent meeting, the Transport Network called in TfL to explain the recent poor performance on the Tube and to set out its plans to improve it. Declarations of interest. Can I ask the Assembly, please, to note the recommendations set out at item 2? Thank you. In addition, do members have any other declarations to make which are relevant to items on the agenda for today's meetings? No clubbers here then. Right. Minutes of the meeting. Can I ask...
Not for free, Tony, no. No gifts.
Can I ask the Assembly to agree the minutes of the London Assembly Mayor's question time held on the 17th of May 2018 to be signed by me as a correct record? Thank you very much. We go on to the main business of today, which is to ask questions of our guests about London's nighttime economy. The question and answer session will be divided into two parts. The Assembly will first ask questions of Philip Colvin QC, former chair of the Nighttime Commission, in the first part of the session. In the second part of the session, the Assembly will ask questions of Kate Nicholls, newly appointed chair of the Nighttime Commission, and Amy Lamé, Night Czar. Each session will start off with a lead-off question from me as chairman. Up to 2 hours has been allowed for the overall session. Right, well, welcome, Mr. Colvin.
Thank you, Chair.
This is the lead-off. Well, actually, you can make a statement and then I'll give you the lead-off question. Go ahead.
It's very kind of you to give me that latitude, Mr. Arbour, but I really am here just to answer questions by the Assembly members and to give them such assistance as I'm able to give. I'm not here with any agenda to push or any line to run. I'm just laying myself open to questions from anyone who wants to ask them.
Very brave. Right. So the lead-off question is this. What is your assessment of the Nighttime Commission based on your tenure as chair?
Chair, from its first meeting in mid-October 2017 until the end of my tenure 3 months later, the Commission, which comprises 26 expert individuals from across the public, private and third sector, had made excellent progress and laid down firm foundations for its future work. It was meeting every 2 months, with a steering group meeting in the off month to plan the next Commission meeting. It was supported by a data and research group drawn from the Commission, the GLA's intelligence unit and exterior experts, whose activities included the definition and measurement of the nighttime economy in London and the development of a toolkit to help each borough to measure and track their own nighttime economies. It had commissioned and directed a consultation exercise of several hundred London organisations, a separate consultation of a representative sample of London citizens, and a third consultation open to everyone through Talk London, together with focus groups to inform the consultation exercise. Now, running alongside this was the Nighttime Economy Borough Champions Network, which comprised senior members and officers of all the London boroughs, which had met quarterly since March, to share good practice across London, to learn about best practice from within London and elsewhere, including internationally, and to feed ideas up to the Commission and to act as a sounding board from the Commission. And the plan was to produce an independent report to the Mayor by July 2018, comprising 3 elements. Element 1 was advice as to the sustainable development of London's nighttime economy, building on the vision for the nighttime economy, the Mayor's vision, of which I was the principal author, and reconciling the growth agenda with the protection agenda. Secondly, a data report, including analysis of the size and composition of the nighttime economy. And thirdly, a good practice guide for the boroughs, incorporating best practice from London and internationally in the management of the nighttime economy, the data toolkit that I've just mentioned, and also best practice in the use of data to measure both the nighttime economy and, importantly, its externalities. The Commission had laid the foundation to complete that work according to that plan in July 2018.
And that's it.
That's all.
Right. Assemblymember Dismore.
Thank you, Chair. Well, you've told us what you achieved in your time as Chair. The Mayor appointed you in January 2017 and you resigned in January 2018.
Yes.
Did you jump or were you pushed?
I didn't actually resign, Mr. Zorn, to be absolutely accurate. I simply didn't seek any extension or renewal of my 12-month contract, which was a quarter full-time equivalent contract. I didn't seek an extension. The circumstances were that there were some concerns about the Nighttime Commission, which I laid out in my resignation letter to the Mayor in January of this year. The concerns, in very brief, concerned the independence of the Nighttime Commission, secondly, its administrative support, and thirdly, the public profiling of the Commission's work. That is set out in great detail in that letter. I'm not sure it's helpful to get into the detail, but I set those out as very clear concerns which were prerequisites for my continuation as Chair. I also said if those concerns could be satisfied, I was very content to work for free. I was very passionate about the work. Unfortunately, those concerns could not be resolved, were not resolved, and so the logical next step was for me to leave the job, which I have to say I enjoyed very much.
Yeah, well, we've seen your other capacities representing Uber drivers, lap dancing club in Sheffield, expensive bar in York, and you're also patron and past chairman of the Institute of Licensing and on the board of the Nighttime Industries Association. And whilst technically these other roles may not be a formal conflict of interest, I think they do raise eyebrows for some people. Was this a factor in you stepping down?
Absolutely not at all, no. Can I contextualise this? I am a barrister, and barristers are subject to something which is called the cab rank rule, and that means that whoever comes and seeks my services, I am obliged to render those services. And in that guise, for example, you raised the question of lap dancing. The legislation which covers lap dancing in this country is the product of pro bono campaigning work that I did with feminist organisations to give local authorities greater control over whether and where lap dancing clubs should be situated. So the fact that I act for this party or that party, I hope as part of the attributes which I brought to the job. My clients comprise, for example, the Gambling Commission, the Security Industry Authority, the Metropolitan Police. It is a question of who picks up the phone and seeks to secure my services. But certainly it didn't give rise in my mind, and I don't think in the Mayor's mind, to any conflict. My job at the Greater London Authority was to try to see all sides and to ensure that London as a whole were able to fashion and formulate the future development of London's nighttime economy. And it was a role I took very seriously. I most certainly didn't bring in any agenda on any part, on the part of any party whom I represent professionally.
Well, as I say, I think they do raise eyebrows, but at last July's Economy Committee, I suggested to you that, quote, it's important that residents are properly represented, not just consulted on the Commission.
Yes.
And you said, quotes, I'll take that as a takeaway from this meeting. I'll take away your views and discuss it with colleagues. Did you do so, and with what outcome? I
did do so, and the outcome was that we considered it was a very large commission. It was 27 members, which I think you would agree is larger than most commissions which sit in this country. And that was so as to get a great diversity of view across the public, private and third sectors. But they included, for example, the Chair of Licensing at Westminster City Council, who every day listens to the concerns of residents. It included Jan Hart, who is the head of public protection at the London Borough of Islington, whose concerns are the protection of residents. It included Joe Negrini, the chief executive of the London Borough of Croydon, who is there, obviously, to advance the agenda for residents. It included Roy Smith of the Metropolitan Police. It included Hannah Wadey of Community Safety. All of these people brought in perspectives from all the different aspects of public protection. Had we had a resident or a residents association, where would it end? Would we have to have one from every borough? Would we have to have one from inner London and outer London and so on and so forth? Instead, we considered the best way of doing this was to consult Londoners as a whole while having a really diverse group within the Nighttime Commission itself. So we did give that very serious consideration, Mr Dismore, and I'm sorry if our decision disappointed you.
Yeah, well, I think it's not a question that disappoints me, it's a question of whether it disappoints residents who are affected by the nighttime economy. But when you stepped down, you stated, and I think you've just said so, that there was not enough done to raise public awareness of the Commission's work. And you've told us that meetings are due to be held every 2 months, but only one meeting was held with you as the chair in October last year. The minutes state, quotes, transparency is crucial to the work of the Commission, but the meetings weren't in public, were closed meetings. So the question is that transparency? And with closed meetings, maybe that also explains the lack of awareness by the public.
Well, how the meetings were held was not a matter for me. I was subject to the administrative organs which govern the administration of this building. If I can correct you, I hope you don't mind, there were meetings of the Nighttime Commission in October 2017. I said they were bi-monthly. There was a further meeting in December 17. It was a matter of great concern to me that the minutes of those meetings should be published as soon as humanly possible on the GLA's website. One of the issues for me, which I know was an issue for your economy committee as well, was what was happening with the production of minutes. The minutes of the December meeting, which I signed off in December, I think were put on the GLA's website a few days ago, and that characterised one of the concerns I had, that we were not being publicised in the way which ought to have been expected. But I certainly agree with you that when a commission is working for the good of London, then its work needs to be entirely transparent and the public need to be fully involved. We were trying to stimulate a conversation amongst Londoners, and for that we needed all the backing of the comms organisation within this building to make sure that our work got out there. And that was the third concern which I raised with the Mayor, that I didn't feel that enough was being done in that regard. I'm quite sure that the message was taken on board, and I hope that now the situation is rather different.
Assemblymember Russell.
Thank you, Chair. Mr Colvin, I want to pick up a bit more on the work that you've been doing developing the Nighttime Economy Borough Champions Network.
Yes.
Now, you explained that the meetings involve senior people from all the 32 boroughs plus the City of London, and it was about sharing good practice and ideas with the Commission. So can you kind of expand on what came out of those meetings, in particular, sort of what might a thriving nighttime or rather evening economy look like, particularly in outer London? And also, can you go through some of the challenges?
Yes. Can I, just for half a second, allied my views with the views of the Borough Champions Network? There is a tendency within boroughs in London, and within the country as a whole, for the word nighttime economy to be used as a dirty word. Interestingly, if you go to the United States, they don't have a term nighttime economy. It just doesn't exist. It seems to be a peculiarly English term, and it's synonymized with binge drinking and alcohol. But in fact, when you look at the nighttime economy consists of all sorts of goods and services which are crucial to London. It consists of retail, it consists of museums, it consists of galleries, it consists of performance. And so much of what is great about London, that creative tension, the creative friction produced by Londoners in their different sectors and their different parts of London, this is crucial to the development of a great nighttime economy in London. The moment it's either seen as or becomes a youth-orientated, alcohol-driven monoculture, then we fail. So what we need to get towards not just in Soho, not just in Covent Garden, not just in Shoreditch, but in every borough in this city, is a diverse nighttime economy which works for all people, whether they are old or young, rich or poor, gay or straight, black or white, whether they love alcohol or won't touch the stuff, whether they've got all sorts of money to splash on theatre and opera and what you will, or in fact if they can only go out once a month and spend a few pounds. The duty of London boroughs and this building is to try and provide for all of those people. So we need to broaden the conversation and try and create on every high street a nighttime economy which works for everybody. Now, part of that, when I talk about everybody, I mean those residents also who live nearby and who have to put up with the outpouring, the outfall of the nighttime economy, that which I call the externality. You have to talk about the safety of people on London's streets. You have to talk about the safety of workers. It would be a matter of huge concern to me if somebody working in the middle of the night in London couldn't get to work safely, couldn't get home safely, wasn't paid the London living wage, found that tips which were being generated through their qualities as a host or hostess were going into the wrong pocket, if there was discrimination in the workplace and so on and so forth. So what we tried to do in the Borough Economy Champions Network was to ensure that all of these themes were explored and to explore good models, for example, of the training of staff within London venues, to do with street guardianship, to do with the financing of the nighttime economy, and to do with building a diverse economy to ensure that these ideas were properly generated.
So can I just press you a bit more on sort of what this Borough Champions Network, how is it that this economy, nighttime economy that you describe, seems like an inclusive economy and one that takes on board the issues that Assemblymember Dismore was raising about the residents.
Yes.
But how will this Borough Champions Network actually help to make this real in the different boroughs?
Yes, okay. So there were two routes, or maybe even three routes for that to happen. The first is that Borough A may have some marvellous practice. They may have a system of mediation to ensure that concerns of residents about a particular venue were resolved without having to go to review. So one of the things we would do was to ensure that Borough A, which operated as good practice, was able to tell all the other boroughs about what they were doing, so as to disseminate good practice in that way.
I'm almost out of the amount of time I can give you. So.
Okay, but I'm going to foreshorten this. The second aspect was to ensure that they learnt about international good practice, again, so they could take it back to their boroughs as champions. And the third was that so that when ideas were generated by the network, they could be fed up to the Commission and then reported as good practice to the Mayor.
Okay, fantastic. And just very finally, is there one lesson, very, very briefly, that you would give to the new chair in terms of working with this institution? Just one thing, and speedily, please.
I think the one thing is the Commission has to be given its legs.
Okay.
It's an independent commission. It must be allowed to be that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Assemblymember Hall.
Thank you. Good morning. The Mayor is alleged to be very supportive of the Nighttime Commission. So how many meetings did you actually have with him?
I did not meet the Mayor or have any communication with him, oral or written, during my whole term of office, with the exception of a photo opportunity before I started in post.
As is his way. Okay. You've said that you were denied extra resource. Who actually stopped you getting extra resource? Who did you ask?
Well, I don't really wish to name names because the names aren't here to answer for themselves. But when I came, I had literally no resource. I then was given a part of one secretary, and I think about April, 3 months after I started. By May, I'd raised this as a serious concern. As a consequence of that, a new person was due to start in post in February. This is the month after I resigned, and 9 months after I raised it as a serious concern. But unfortunately, that person was not to be accountable to the Commission, and we were not to be entitled to ask for any particular percentage of that person's time. So I couldn't see that really resolved the concern, which had really exercised me in the 12 months I was here.
Well, it must have done because you can't do your job properly. How many meetings did you have with Amy Lamé?
Certainly a handful.
Right, okay, because a year ago, you both told us that you had regular monthly meetings.
Yes, there was a programmed monthly meeting with myself and the Night Czar, the Director of Policy, and the Deputy Mayor for Culture.
If it was programmed, that therefore doesn't mean that she was always there.
I would say that it happened, I'm struggling to remember, I'm sorry, but it happened, I would say, in the majority of months.
Okay, fine. All right, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does any other member have any questions of Mr. Colvin? Well, we're grateful to you for coming. You've certainly given us an insight into your year. Would you please move to the motion on the agenda set out in my name that the Assembly notes the answers to the questions asked?
Agreed.
Thank you so much for coming, Mr.
Thank you very
Colvin.
much for having me.
Thank you.
Okay. What item is petitions? Okey-doke. The next session isn't scheduled immediately, so in the hope that we can save time, can we please deal with petitions now? Okay. Right. And the first petition, please, is from Assemblymember Pigeon. Will you please present the petition listed in your name?
Escalation in knife crime on London streets. We urge him to replicate the Glasgow initiative, which treats this epidemic as a public health issue. This approach will bring together partners in the NHS, youth services, education and judiciary, parents and community groups to build a framework to reduce the carrying of knives on London streets. We believe this problem will not be resolved by the police working in isolation. We in particular want to see youth workers in all A&E departments to engage with patients attending with stab wounds, more dedicated youth workers, and a programme of support for teachers and parents in identifying gangs and behaviour leading to attacks.
Thank you very much. Could I please ask the Assembly to agree to forward this petition to the Mayor in his capacity as the occupant of the Mayor's Office for Policing and Crime? Thank you very much. The second petition is in the name of Assemblymember O'Connell.
It's in the name of Assemblymember Devonish, and in his absence, Mr. Chair, I am presenting three petitions, all on the same subject, which is an 80-metre tower in Fulham. I shall read them as briefly as quickly as I can. First petition, local residents call on Mayor of London to veto plans to build an 80-metre tower in Fulham. The council has approved its own planning application to build a new tower on St Thomas Way. The tower will be 80 metres in height, over 20 metres higher than the old tower. With double the footprint, it will have a huge impact on the local community. The planning application has been called in by the Mayor of London, who is concerned about the plans. The proposal results in fewer social housing units across Walter Meadow Court and Edith Summerskill than before. Many local residents agree with the Mayor and are calling on the Council to rethink their plans. That's one petition. The second petition, local residents call, same subject, local residents call on Mayor of London to veto plans to build an 80-metre tower in Fulham. Planning application has been called in by the Mayor of London, who is concerned about the plans. The proposal is to redevelop and sell all the social housing in Walter Meadow Court, Sands End, at market prices, to build a new tower of affordable housing on St Thomas Way. The tower will be 80 metres in height, over 20 metres higher than the old tower, with double the footprint. This will have a huge impact on the local community. The result will be fewer social housing units than before. Many local residents agree with the Mayor and are calling on the Council to rethink their plans. And pleasingly, the last petition requests the Mayor of London to veto Hammersmith and Fulham's plan to redevelop Edith Summerskill House, with a new tower. Hammersmith and Fulham should design a low mid-rise development that is architecturally in harmony with its neighbourhood. Respect their tall buildings policy. September 2016, that only deems White City, Hammersmith Town Centre, Earls Court and West Ken and South Fulham, Riverside as suitable for Towers. Oh, that's all three petitions. I'd like to present them accordingly.
Thank you very much. I'm sure Assemblymember Devonish will be grateful to you. Can I ask the Assembly to agree to forward the petitions to the Mayor for response? Thank you so much. Shall we do the petitions update? And whilst we're on petitions, can I please ask you in relation to item 7 to note the responses received to petitions presented at recent Assembly meetings as set out in the report. Okay, we're now ready to go. All right, we will now deal with item 5 because so unusually we're ahead of schedule. Agenda item 5 relates to the appointment of independent persons, which you can find on pages 9 to 12 of the agenda. Can I ask that Assembly members agree to extend the appointment of Suzanne McCarthy and Alan Simcock as independent persons under Section 28(7) of the Localism Act 2011 to extend that appointment to the 30th of June 2020, noting that this is a joint decision with the Mayor. Agree that? Thank you so much. Right, and we're now really banging this through. Item 9, which is mayoral commitments. Can I ask that the Assembly notes the commitments made by the Mayor, Sadiq Khan, during London Assembly Mayor's Question Time meetings held between May 2016 and March 2018. Thank you. And we'll deal with item 10 as well. Future meetings of the Assembly. Can I ask the Assembly to agree to use the 5th of July 2018 plenary meeting to hold a question and answer session with Liz Peace, Chair, and Michael Mulhern, Interim Chief Executive Officer of the Old Oak and Park Royal Development Corporation. Thank you. Now I am told our guests are on the way down here. It really depends on the lifts.
Next week.
Shall we take a break? Yes. Can we please go to 12A? I would like to ask you before reading the enormous splurge that I have in relation to this, is item 12A, which relates to the appointment of our new Chief Officer, something that members will want to debate? Is there anyone who will want to debate this? Right, that makes it so much simpler, so I shall simply read all this stuff out. I have, in accordance with Section 100B(4) of the LGA Act 1972 as amended, accepted the report circulated under a supplementary agenda as an item of urgent business on the grounds that consideration of the appointment of the Chief Officer needs to be undertaken by the Assembly at the earliest possible opportunity. Members will see that Appendix 2, the Chief Officer contract, has been provided to members only and has been reserved from publication for the reasons set out in the paper. Should members wish to discuss the content of that document, and we've decided we don't, we will need to resolve to exclude the press and public from the meeting. And I would suggest that we do so at the end of the meeting so that we discuss as much of this item in public as possible. If members do not wish, and you do not, to discuss the content of that document, then I will simply ask the Assembly at the end of the discussion to confirm the exclusion of that agenda item from publication. Can I ask, please, that the Assembly, noting that this is a joint decision with the Mayor, approve the appointment of Mary Hartley as the Greater London Authority's Chief Officer, incorporating the statutory role of Head of Paid Service. You agree that? Thank you. Will you please note the Mayor's appointment of Mary Hartley as the Greater London Returning Officer, and note that both appointments are with effect from the 10th of September 2018 and on the terms and considerations set out in the Chief Officer contract at Appendix 2. Thank you. Can I ask the Assembly to confirm that pursuant to Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, the information set out as Agenda Item 12C should be excluded from publication on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined by paragraph 1 of Schedule 12A to the Local Government Act 1972. And it is considered that in all the circumstances of the case, the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information, and also to note the information set out. Thank you. Okay, all done. Are they here? Has the lift arrived?
Still awaited, Chairman.
Truth.
Motions, Chairman.
Well, I think that we will proceed to motions.
Oh, I'd rather not. I've not got
You'd
my
rather
thoughts
not?
collected yet, Chair, and I must speak.
Okay, well,
Well, I'll be here in a second.
he said.
Would you wish to adjourn?
Perhaps you talk amongst yourselves. We all know about the lifts.
Do the cats.
Some of the motions are non-controversial.
Do the cat motion.
Can we deal with the cat?
Non-controversial motions.
Sean, do you think you could deal with the... Do you need preparation for the cat motion? Oh, well, let us deal, please, with the final motion on the agenda.
Come on, Sean.
Ah, no, there. Look. Thank you very much. Unusually, we're running ahead of schedule. Can I welcome our guests, Kate Nicholls, Chair of the Nighttime Commission, and Amy Lamé, Night Czar. Welcome to the meeting.
Thank you so much.
There will be one lead-off question from me as Chairman, and Assembly members may ask supplementary questions after that question has been answered. However, before I put the lead-off question, the Assembly will receive a short opening statement from Ms Nicholls and Ms Lamé. Do you want to start, Ms Nicholls?
My opening statement is simply to introduce myself, for those of you who don't know me.
Okay.
So my name is Kate Nicholls. I am, in addition to being the chairman of the Nighttime Commission, taking over in April earlier this year. I am also chief executive of UK Hospitality, which is the trade body that represents hospitality businesses. Amy,
Thank
I
you very
think
much.
had
Ms
a-
Lamé?
Yes, first of all, I'd like to thank the Assembly for inviting Kate and I to give evidence today. And the Mayor has made supporting nighttime economy and culture a top priority. This is a brand new area of work for City Hall, and as with any new initiative, it has required new structures, jobs, policies and ways of working to be put in place. So as well as my appointment as Night Czar, the Nighttime Commission has been set up. A new network of nighttime borough champions has been established, and I've been building new relationships with public authorities, communities, and the business sector. I sit within the Culture Department of the GLA, and I report into the Deputy Mayor for Culture. Culture and creativity is innately linked with the life of great cities at night. The great majority of Londoners want to live in a vibrant and diverse city, and culture is where this vibrancy and diversity takes form. The nighttime and culture leisure sectors alone contribute over £26 billion a year to London's economy and supports 1 in 8 jobs. And unlike other cities, my role is about far more than pubs, clubs, bars, and venues. It is about our night culture and the way that we want to live at night in our great city of London. The Mayor's 24-hour London programme encompasses the breadth of culture, of entertainment, leisure activities, and others, but evening and nighttime is when most Londoners socialise, they seek entertainment, they're relaxing with friends or family, and a healthy 24-hour city is vital to London's and Londoners' well-being. So it's a whole range of services that this encompasses, from perhaps going to the post office, to visiting the doctor, to being able to do your weekly shop after finishing an evening shift, through to the safety, health, and well-being of those working and travelling at night. The night tube and the night overground have already transformed London at night. It was an honour to launch the Piccadilly line and the overground, those night services. And in its first year, the night tube alone has boosted the capital's economy by over £170 million. It supported 3,600 jobs and cut late-night journeys by an average of 20 minutes. In the next 30 years, the night tube and night overground is predicted to add £360 million to London's economy every year. It's clear that the Mayor is supporting 24-hour London through a range of leadership initiatives and guidance, and my appointment being one of those. My priority is to broaden out the conversation around London as a 24-hour city so that we talk about the benefits that Londoners gain from living in a 24-hour city. We're very good at planning for 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., but less good at planning for our city between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. We rarely talk about daytime crime and antisocial behaviour, but for some reason, we regularly talk about the costs of crime and antisocial behaviour in the evening and at night. So we have to really recognise the huge number of benefits that a healthy, welcoming, and diverse city life in the evening and at night can bring socially, culturally, and economically. One of my roles is to work with stakeholders to help balance the needs of those who work at night, those who want to go out at night, and those residents who want a good night's sleep. It is about addressing the concerns of Londoners, such as the fear of harassment or antisocial behaviour at night, and making the city safer, especially for women at night. Now, undoubtedly, there are challenges at night, but we should also recognize that crime is no more prevalent at night than it is in the day, and in fact, London is one of the safest cities in the world. The strength of London's nighttime economy and culture is in its diversity, and strengthening this is key to developing safe and welcoming, sustainable nighttime culture and economy for all Londoners. And we need positive planning around this to attract the right balance of businesses and activities. It's also about ensuring that those that work at night have access to safe facilities and exactly the same benefits as those who choose to work in the day. There's also a huge need to protect our at-risk nighttime culture. In the past 10 years, London has lost 25% of its pubs, 35% of its grassroots live music venues, 50% of its nightclubs, and 58% of its Lgbt venues. So my role as the Night Czar is to convene and lead this conversation with key stakeholders to hear Londoners' concerns, those of businesses and residents, imbalance and broker solutions. So the Nighttime Commission was set up, and the Mayor called for the Nighttime Commission to make recommendations on how to deliver the 24-hour vision, which was published in July 2017. And I'd like to thank Philip Colvin for his substantial input to the Mayor's 24-hour vision, for setting up the Commission of such breadth and expertise, for setting up the Nighttime Borough Champions Network, which I'm now very proud to be chairing, and for setting the research and consultation program into action. Now, I'm sure Kate will be keen to tell you more about the work of the Nighttime Commission, but it's important to note that the Commission is an independent commission that brings together leading experts from business, local government, culture, design, safety, security, transport, and the media. And to support the work of the Commission, the GLA Intelligence Unit have carried out extensive research and program of qualitative and quantitative research. They've consulted widely with organizations including local authorities, community groups, residents associations, businesses, charities, and other organizations. And they're really doing amazing work to analyse this, the Commission's research working group. And so the hope is that it will inform the Commission's report and the recommendations to the Mayor, which will be delivered by the end of this year. I'm aware that there are many more things that can be done, and we've only just begun on this journey. There's so much more we can achieve, and I want to realise the benefits of living in a 24-hour city for Londoners of all ages, all backgrounds and all interests. I am a night czar for all Londoners. But over the next year, I will promote and implement the Women's Night Safety Charter with the help of the London Boroughs, working in collaboration with my colleagues at MOPAC. I will support the Mayor's Good Work Standard to ensure that it recognises the need for London's nighttime workforce to receive the pay, conditions and safeguards they deserve. I will continue to protect London's nighttime cultural venues with the Mayor's Culture at Risk Officer. I will continue to work with my colleagues in MOPAC, the Met and the boroughs to ensure there is a consistent approach to licensing which respects the needs of businesses but also of residents. And I will carry out at least 6 more nighttime surgeries across the capital, visiting and meeting with a range of workers, businesses, residents and visitors to London, and I will also be responding to the recommendations of the Nighttime Commission. And I am also currently writing to all the boroughs to offer to visit their boroughs following the local government elections, and I very much look forward to engaging with the new councillors on nighttime economy issues. Thank you very much, Chair.
Well, thank you. You've anticipated my first question because you have already answered it. So we'll go straight to questions from Assembly members. Assemblymember Hall.
Okay, thank you. If the Mayor has made the nighttime economy a top priority, why then did he never see Philip Colvin?
I can't answer that question. I have no idea.
Doesn't look like a Mayor that's that interested if he doesn't see the chair.
The Mayor appointed Philip to look after the Nighttime Commission, and Philip did, I think, an excellent job in the first year.
But Philip says that the Commission wasn't given enough independence. So were you or somebody from the Mayor's office leaning on him?
I have always been very clear that the Commission has been independent, and the Commission has always sat at arm's length from the work that I do, and that's hugely important for the work of the Commission, and that the recommendations that come through once the report is completed, that those recommendations are robust and that they are independently formed.
Well, why would he say then that there wasn't enough independence?
You'll have to ask Philip on that.
Did you meet him many times?
I've met with Philip regularly. We had monthly meetings, as he previously said. We had monthly meetings with the Deputy Mayor for Culture and Creative Industries and with the representative of the Mayor's office. So, yes.
He said a handful of times, but we'll pass on that one. He also complained that there was insufficient resources. What's your comment around that?
I've always found the resources available to me not only adequate but outstanding. The work that the people that work here in this building do is incredible, and they've been very supportive of the work that we're doing around nighttime economy.
So you've got enough resource to put all the minutes of your meetings up on the website as and when necessary and to keep all that going?
I was not Philip's personal assistant.
No, I said you have. You, I'm talking about you now.
Me personally?
You personally.
I have an assistant to do that.
So you're fairly certain that everything's up to date?
Well, as you pointed out, we're separate. Yeah, the Nighttime Commission is independent.
About you now. Let's talk about you. So everything in your area is up to date?
I would hope so, yes.
Okay. When was your last surgery?
My last surgery... Here we go. My last surgery was on the 23rd of May, and that was with the Business Improvement District, with B Midtown. This is a really interesting opportunity area for transport and for culture, because you may know when the Elizabeth line opens, the new Farringdon station will be opening.
Okay.
And
Right.
the Business Improvement District is working.
Okay, I just asked when it was, so you've given me the answer. I was hoping that things would be up to date, because in this wonderfully vague, what do we call it, suggestion of your vision for London, you said and it says here, and I quote, you can keep up to date with the work of the Night Czar and the Nighttime Commission, and then it gives a web address. So if you go on that, it doesn't say anything about the May
Does it
night
include
surgery.
Does it include the night surgery I did in the London Borough of Havering?
Yes, which was February.
Yes.
Yes, it also mentions that you do monthly night surgeries. Well, if you go to your website that we're all directed to, or the public is directed to,
Assemblymember Hall, I'd very much like to talk you
finish.
through all of the excellent
it
surgeries that I've been doing, and the
No,
great
Ms.
work
Lamé,
that...
Ms. Lamé, you're here to answer questions.
Yes.
So you should
Yes.
endeavour to answer the questions which have been put to you.
Yes.
Right. I asked you if everything you were connected with was up to date. You said, as far as you were concerned, it was. The very place you send people to look at how to get hold of you says that you have monthly night surgeries. Well, clearly you don't, because it lists where you've been. It doesn't mention anything after Havering. It also mentions a newsletter. How many newsletters have you done?
We have not undertaken the job of doing a newsletter yet.
Well, that will be why, when I signed up to your newsletter, I've had nothing back. It actually says, and I quote, read about one of her surgeries or sign up to Amy's newsletter. I signed up, as perhaps others did. Nothing, absolutely nothing. And yet you are full-time here now, I believe, yes?
Yes.
Okay. Well, may I suggest one of the first things that you do after today is to look up the place that you send everybody to and make sure it's updated. And if you're going to say you do a monthly night surgery, I suggest you do that. When we had our meeting in July, you said the one thing you were here to do was to listen and to speak to residents. Once you were pushed by Andrew Dismore about residents, which were very good questioning from Mr. Dismore. Once you said that the most important thing was to hold your surgeries and to listen. I operate an open door and listening service, was what you actually said. But how on earth can people know where to go, where to listen to you, how to engage with you, if it's not where you direct people to?
I would very much like to invite you to attend the next night surgery that we have, which is later this month. It is at the Ace Cafe that I'm doing in joint collaboration with MOPAC and the Motorcycle Action Group. If you don't know the Ace Cafe, it is a historic place for people who are interested in motorbikes, and it's an important part of the work that I do to engage with different communities
Of course it is,
across
but
London.
If you look here, next night surgeries, TBA, and it's been like that for quite some time. So may I suggest to you that you actually fill this in?
Thank you very much for your suggestion. Thank you.
That's okay. So how often do you think you see the mayor?
I saw the mayor yesterday.
Was it for a photo opportunity?
No, it was actually for an in-depth discussion about the progress that's been made over the last 18 months and the exciting work that we have planned for the next 6 months.
Well, if there is lots of interesting progress on work, perhaps you can publish it somewhere so that we can
I'd be
all
very
share.
happy to run you through, because I know...
No, we don't have time. I'd like to be able to read it and to question what you've actually said you've done, because I am concerned of this area. How often would you say you're actually at City Hall?
I'm at City Hall most days of the week. Of course, a lot of my work is sort of different work patterns, because I'm often working at night and out and about. So, yes, but I'm at City Hall most days.
Oh, good. Okay, well, if you get out and about, how many borough leaders have you met?
Well, seeing as there's recently been a change,
Well, that's very recently. You've been in post 18 months. So how many, I'll ask you again, how many borough leaders have you met?
I've met with most borough leaders. I can come back to you with the exact number.
That would be very helpful,
Yes.
if you could, please. So what were the outcomes of these meetings, and who have you particularly helped?
Yes, so maybe I'll just update you on the most recent meeting I had, which was in the London Borough of Enfield, that Assemblymember McCartney looks after, which was a very fruitful meeting. Interesting place because they realize that they have great opportunities to build a sustainable and balanced nighttime economy, and they have some exciting plans they're looking at, but they do want to develop their own nighttime strategy. That is what we're doing with the Borough Champions, helping boroughs to develop that. So they approached me and said, could we work on this together? So I have been helping them, linking them up with other boroughs, with best practice, and I'm very much looking forward to carrying that conversation on with the new leader of the Borough of Enfield.
Yes, that's actually an interesting point you've brought it up, because a year ago, the Conservative now leader, Jo Laban, was there, and she brought up the subject, why don't you talk to the Night Czar? They hadn't heard of you, didn't know what you did. Again, impressing the point that you need to get that sorted out. So the Conservative, can you believe it, actually was the one that went to the council and said, why don't you engage with her? So I'm glad to hear that they've taken our advice. That's all for at the moment. Thank you.
Okay. Assembly-member Dismore.
Chair. Kate, could you tell us what you think success will look like in 1 year's time for the Commission? And in particular for both of you, do you think you've got the balance right between the promotion of the nighttime venues and so on, with the interests of local residents who may be affected by antisocial behaviour, often linked to excess alcohol consumption? And following on the questions that Susan Hall was asking you, Amy, about your night surgeries, you've told us about surgeries which aren't really for residents. The Midtown is a business one. The Ace Cafe is mainly for bikers. When was how many meetings you've actually had with residents? And are your meetings with residents published in advance so people know they're coming? In particular, your night surgeries. Where do people find out in advance that you're doing them, so if they want to talk to you, they can?
Yes. Would you like me to
Yeah.
start? I think we have I've been a member of the Commission since the start, so I've been working on the Commission since October and took over as chair in April. And we've mapped out a programme of activity for the remainder of this year, which will allow us to deliver a report to the Mayor's Office and to the Night Czar by the end of the year, setting out our recommendations for translating the Mayor's vision for a 24-hour city into practice. And one of the first things that we did as a Commission and spent the first meeting debating was, what were we looking at as a Commission? And we were quite clear that we were not the Nighttime Economy Commission, we were the Mayor's Nighttime Commission, and we were looking at how Londoners experience London at night in all its various facets, as Amy described. So our vision is broader than just the nighttime economy, and it is to make sure that we have recommendations that are coming through to translate the vision into practical steps, toolkits for action that can be taken by local boroughs, but also by local residents, to make sure that their high street, their town centre, their neighbourhood, their community works for them in practice, and that we have vibrant, diverse, accessible night times in London for all Londoners, and that we have a practical set of recommendations that will impact on the lives of everyday Londoners and residents within the city. So just picking up also on Susan's point, when I did take on the role and sort of stepped forward from being a commissioner to chairing, and my role is very different to Philip's because I am there to make sure we drive forward the work of the Commission and to very practically address the steps that we were doing and take the work forward that he'd started. We did pick up, and I've had 3 meetings with the Deputy Mayor for Culture and Creative Industries, particularly picking up on Philip's 3 concerns that he had about his role and the work of the Nighttime Commission. I'm particularly keen to make sure that when I stepped forward to the role of chair, and my deputy chair, Ramel Mosley, that we had the support we needed to deliver the work programme that the Commission was asking for and that the Mayor needed, and the time frame. We have got that additional support. I have had 3 meetings with the Deputy Mayor to make sure that we've got the reassurances that the Commissioners need, all 26 of them, to continue the work programme and to take that forward. So additional administrative support, additional support in writing, additional support in research, The minutes are as up-to-date as we've got them. That's my fault. I haven't had time to assess the minutes of the May meeting to make sure that the team who are supporting us from the GLA can put them online, but they are as up-to-date as we can get them, and there's a commitment to make sure that the Commission's work is fully transparent. So I'm fully confident, and I wouldn't have taken the post otherwise, that we have the reassurances that we will have the support we need, and that now, post the local elections, that we will have the profile that we need to take that work forward.
Amy?
Assemblymember Dismore, could you just repeat the question, please?
Yeah, it's quite straightforward. It's asking how many meetings you've had with residents, bearing in mind that the surgeries you mentioned, one was in Midtown, which wasn't for residents, it was for business, and the forthcoming one at the Ace Cafe is primarily, I think, for bikers,
Yes.
which is not the same as meeting residents, for example, along the Northern Line, from where I get regular complaints, particularly at weekends. So
Yes.
what meetings have you had with residents? And in relation to meetings with residents, how are they published in advance so people know that you're doing them?
Yes. So night surgeries are usually publicised on my social media channel, and we make every effort to ensure that there's balanced representation in the night surgeries that we do put together. We realise that certain communities need more intense specialist night surgeries. For example, the night surgery I conducted in conjunction with the SIA. And that was because we had word that there were some difficulties that security were facing in getting their licenses renewed. So
I'm sorry, that's not dealing with residents. I'm asking you about dealing with residents, not all the commercial interests or special interests. And you're talking about a balanced event. Balancing what with what? I mean, residents don't need balancing. They often need answers to the particular problems that they're facing.
I had an excellent meeting
as a result of the nighttime economy.
I had an excellent meeting with Sleepless Brixton, and I've been working with the local MP and local councillors, the borough champions in Lambeth, to address the issues concerning residents and noise in that area.
Anywhere else?
Yes, I've met with the Jago residents group, which is in Hackney, yes, and Tower Hamlets, Shoreditch area. I've also met with the Soho Residents and Businesses Association. So that is a joint effort by businesses and residents to address issues of noise in their area.
Okay.
May I just add briefly from the Commission?
Well, I'm running out of time, so I'm going to put another question to you. Okay. And Amy, I think, as well. On the Mayor's vision for the 24-hour London, which sets out 10 principles covering just about everything you can think of, from accessible nightlife to cultural opportunities. How are you going to ensure those principles are not just successfully implemented, but how will you objectively measure your progress? What key performance indicators do you have in relation to those principles?
Yes, well, that's. I'm so glad that you asked that, because I do have a list of all the 29 principles here.
Now, I've got the principles. I want to know what the key performance indicators are by which you're going to measure objectively whether or not you've delivered them.
Well, I can run you through each of the 29 actions that were set out in the blue boxes in the Mayor's 24-hour vision. 20 actions are complete, 9 are in progress. Would you like me to take you through those?
Well, we haven't got time, I'm afraid. If you want to write to us about that, that's fine. But I'm afraid we're out of time. So I think if you write to us with your key performance indicators, that would be helpful.
Certainly.
Assemblymember Russell.
Thank you. Earlier I asked Philip Colvin about the work of the Borough Champions Network. He said that there were due to be some reports published in July on this, but do I understand, Amy, you said that they were going to be published now by the end of the year?
I think he was perhaps referring to the Commission report.
Okay, so,
rather than the Borough Champions
I'm very
Network.
tight on time, far
Yes.
tighter than they are. Is the Commission report still due to be published in July?
No, it isn't. There's
When
been a
will it be
slight hiatus, but
When?
it'll be fully published by the end of the year.
Also by the end of the year, so
Yes.
we've got a big gap there. Can I also clarify, Amy, you're now chairing the Borough Champions.
Yes, that's
so
right.
that used to sit with the Commission, is now sitting with you?
Yes.
Okay, and so the work of trying to, Philip talked about, the nighttime economy as a dirty word. If you end up with youth and alcohol monoculture, you've failed. So he, I think, saw the work of the Borough Champions Network about helping the boroughs to move to a much more constructive, resident-friendly nighttime and maybe culture-based nighttime economy. Is that work sitting with both the Commission and the Borough Champions Network?
Yes, it is. I mean, we are very fortunate that we have 3 borough champions sitting as commissioners who are there to provide that dialogue and two-way conversation so that we know what they're doing and they know what we're doing. It's a key component of the work stream that we've got going forward to produce the final report. And then Amy is chairing the actual Borough Champions Network meetings. And so we've got the two-way dialogue coming from Amy in that meeting to feed into our work when we sit as a commission.
Okay, and how frequently does the Borough Champions Network meet?
We meet quarterly.
Quarterly?
Yes.
Okay, and so your next meeting... or what, your last meeting?
Yeah, I will give you the date of the next meeting.
If you could send that to me,
yes,
that would be great.
And,
the last
and I would
meeting
like
on the website is last September.
Yes.
Sorry, one more thing. Yes. Then I want to go back to the rewrite the night report that the Economy Committee produced. And we talked about having a gold standard for venue management. Now, I've noted the Mayor's response, but he hasn't actually explicitly said whether he's going to create that gold standard, which is about security staff who are trained to look out for the well-being of someone on a night out, particularly anyone who's on their own, who may have possibly had too much to drink, or if they're being pestered by other customers. So are you going to, is the Nighttime Commission going to create this gold standard for venue management?
That is one of the areas that we're looking around recommendations, and we're seeing if we can take it from just a recommendation to creating it ourselves. It's still to be determined by our other commissioners, and I'd want to talk to them to make sure that they are happy with that as recommendations. But we're taking the excellent work that the committee did and using that report. It forms part of our evidence base for taking forward our recommendations to deliver the 24-hour vision. So it's one of the key areas that we're looking at.
Okay, and when do you think you'll have come to some conclusions on that?
I would anticipate that that would be in our meeting in October, when we're hoping to have a green paper and ideas of recommendations. So my challenge to the commissioners is I will put them to, the last meeting we had, I suggested I would put a framework for the commission, give them a green paper with a list of options for recommendations and areas for further work and homework over the summer. So they're going to take away that homework and then we will come back and finalise our recommendations.
Okay, I'll chase you in October if it
yes,
hasn't appeared.
Please do.
And finally, sorry, it's completely disappeared. I had one more thing that I was finally going to get out of you. Yes, the data, that sounds absolutely brilliant, the data that the GLA people are doing. When are the boroughs going to have access to that data to help them make their nighttime economy better?
Sorry, I'm going to be slightly vague, and I'm trying not to give a civil service answer, but I would anticipate that's towards the end of the year. I'm hoping that that data can be published before the Commission's recommendations come out.
Okay, well, we're looking forward to the end of the year. Thank you. I'm out of time.
Apologies.
My questions are to the Night Czar. The protection of London's diverse cultural heritage is vital, and as you mentioned at the start, last July research found around 58% of London's LGBTQ+ venues have closed since 2006. And on the back of these findings, you and the Mayor committed to an annual audit of these venues. When will this be published? And in the meantime, can you give me an exact figure of any further closures since last summer?
Yes. Thank you very much for the question. This is an area of great concern for us in the nighttime economy, as culture is an absolutely vital part of a vibrant and diverse life at night here in London. I work very closely with our culture at risk officer here, and we have indeed lost 58% of our LGBT venues in the past 10 years. The Mayor has committed to doing an annual audit, and we anticipate that this will be published just around Pride time, so the beginning of July. And the figures at the moment are holding steady.
there haven't
We're
been any
hoping
closures?
for. I mean, I think that there's been such a great loss that even just holding steady on this would be positive news.
So there haven't been any closures since last year?
There have been some closures, but there have been openings as well.
Okay.
So we're looking at the kind of net.
Okay. And you were asked by the Mayor to make the protection of these venues an urgent priority, mediating between parties. How many successful interventions have you made to date, given you've mentioned that some have closed?
Yes. Well, overall, for culture at risk, we have been able to help over 200 venues.
Yeah, and specifically LGBT.
Specifically LGBT venues. Well, I'll give one particular example that we're very proud of. And that is in East London, the Joiners Arms, where we were able to convene the local authority, the developers and the community group to work together to find a solution. The developers were knocking down the venue, they had no plans to re-provision it, and we were able to convene and work together. So that will be re-provided in the new development. There's a guarantee from the local authority of a 25-year lease for an LGBT venue and other favourable terms for the community. So this is an exciting development, and we hope to be able to test this in other boroughs around London.
Thank you for that example. You also launched a venue charter to safeguard these spaces. Exactly how many venues and organisations have signed up to this?
Yes. So the venues charter is really targeted at pubcos, and it's as a way of encouraging them as a sort of guideline for what does an LGBT venue look like. Now, we may have all different ideas in our mind, but we were trying to kind of get back to basic principles around equality of provision of services, having well-trained staff,
How many have
being
signed
safe. And so we have the largest pubco in the country signed up, and we have just signed up the largest pub company in the UK.
So you've got two pub companies signed
Two
up.
pubcos,
And
yes.
that's
But
it so
collectively,
far.
that represents a number of pubs.
Yeah.
I can come back to you with the
It'd be
exact
great to have
number.
exact figures. Now, you've
Yeah.
disappointed that that's only how many you've got so far. What's your aim? What's your target?
I'm not disappointed because I know that the will is there, and it wasn't aimed at existing LGBT venues because we know that they are alive and that we are helping them to thrive. So it was more as guidelines for opening up new pubs. So that's why it's important to have a business-facing offering to give confidence to businesses to say, yes, we can think about opening up new LGBT venues. It's about creating confidence within the sector.
I look forward to you writing with that further detail on that. And on a different issue, in response to the tragic drug-related deaths at Fabric nightclub in Farringdon, you said, I would never want anything like that to happen ever again. And
Yes.
we have to do everything we can to prevent it. The Met Commissioners recently warned that recreational drug users are helping to fuel the rise of violence on the streets. So in light of this, what work are you doing with the Met Police and venues to consider how best to tackle drug use and keep Londoners safe?
I think it's important to realise that drug use happens during the day as well as night. This is not a problem that is just owned by the night. This is a problem that is owned by all of society 24/7. And I know the Metropolitan Police do an amazing job at keeping London safe. And I work closely with the Met, with MOPAC, with my colleagues at Business Crime Reduction Partnership, and a number of partnerships across the capital to ensure that we keep London safe.
Okay, I think I'm out of time. I'm not
Thank
sure
you very much.
fully answered that, but thank you.
Assemblymember Duval.
The areas of skills, and I think it's the Commission. Really, it's about how are we working with stakeholders to ensure the nighttime economy has access to talent and skilled workers that it needs to thrive?
Well, both with my Commission hat on and as my day job as the Chief Executive of the Trade Association, we are working with the Mayor's Office and with national government to make sure that we have a supportive migration policy that meets the needs of London and Londoners. And, you know, the hospitality sector of which the nighttime economy, it drives the nighttime economy, 25% of our workforce nationally are foreign workers. But actually, if you come to London, it's closer to 70 or 80%. And so that's a very real issue that we need to look at. So we, as a sector and an industry, have put a proposal to national government for a sector deal that develops a sector skills approach, that puts in place policies that will look for upskilling our domestic workforce, upskilling our existing workforce, so we make people rise rapidly through the ranks from entry level, and also we have focused policies and programs in place to support returners to work and those hard to place. We're also particularly working on homeless, ex-offenders and ex-servicemen to try and recruit them and upskill them and provide them with high-quality careers in the sector. And then it's about making sure that we have a migration policy that is suitable for the needs of London, because our nighttime economy, our hospitality sector is vital to London's soft capital and for the jobs we need to support in finance, in fintech, etc. So we are working quite collectively there, and as an industry we're investing in hospitality diplomas so that we can upskill and provide structured career paths to take people from any point of entry right the way through to degree level and post.
The Federation of Small Businesses highlighted that the current apprenticeship schemes is really not, it's failing to mirror the industry needs really in some ways. So what is the Commission going to undertake some research around the failure of that apprenticeship system? And in doing so, what conversations is the Commission having or influencing the role of the LEAP and some of the work that we're going to have in the FE sector in the future here in this building?
The short answer is that the Commission is not commissioning direct research on that. So we've done some additional research to look at the whole framework that impacts London at night. But in order to provide a very focused, practical report that comes out with some outcomes and some KPIs, as Mr. Dismal said, that will deliver meaningful change for Londoners and their experience of London at night, we've had to narrow our focus. I think otherwise we would never have got a report out, because you can look at all sorts of issues to do with London. However, we are taking forward, as an industry and as a sector, separate work outside of the role of the Commission to pick up on those very issues and to press at a national level for further devolved powers to do with skills, for the LEPs to be involved and make sure that they are delivering. On the apprenticeship reform, there is a broadly based coalition of interests. I sit with the FSB in my day job and the CBI to press for reform of the apprenticeship levy at a national level, because it isn't working as it should be doing to support small businesses in particular, where we can see apprenticeship numbers are down dramatically.
Okay, so is the Commission then, so I'm not quite clear from that answer, albeit it was quite a full answer, there's no criticism in that, but is the Commission then working with the Mayor's Skill for Londoners programme around, programmes and the London curriculum for that steady flow of skilled Londoners for the nighttime economy, or for just increasing our capacity in this area?
No, the Commission is not working specifically on that at the moment as part of its work stream. I think that there's a role and a life of the Commission potentially after it delivers its first report to look at these broader areas, and that may be one of the areas of recommendation that some of my fellow Commissioners might not thank me for, but I think it's an area that we would inevitably need to look at, that there may be an ongoing work programme that is needed for further future planning.
Or another way to do it, if, should not the Mayor of London just direct the LEAP to look at that area to just speed up and accelerate that work in terms of furthering the work of his aspirations on the nighttime economy? Is that another way of achieving the same end?
That may well be, but that's sort of outside of my remit as Chair of the Nighttime Commission to be able to make recommendations for future work programmes. But it's an area that, as the Chief Executive of UK Hospitality, we would be very keen to work with the Mayor and the LEP on that.
So I don't understand why it's outside your remit as the Commission, in the sense that there's more than enough work to go round, and others should be doing a contribution to it. It's a major policy, a major plank of Mayor's policy. Why can't a simple request go through and just saying, actually, this is an important area of work? If you've got spare capacity, why don't you undertake that in furthering the mayoral policy?
I just don't want to prejudge the work of the Commission, because I've got 26 other expert commissioners who work with me. We've spent the first third of our work looking at what are the issues arising from the Mayor's vision, and we've focused our work programme around barriers to achieving that vision and what we might need to overcome that. We're not at the stage yet of making recommendations. I appreciate that's hugely frustrating, and that you're keen for us to be able to provide answers straight away. We're not at that stage yet, and I don't want to prejudge what the Commission might want to recommend.
But doesn't Brexit mean that you should be at that stage, or someone should be in this building at that stage, in terms of this important sector of our economy?
I am sure that the other people in this building are well on top of that. I know that outside of this building there is a broad coalition of business interests making that case collectively to not only the Mayor of London but other regional mayors, national government, to make sure that this vital economy, which employs nearly 3 million people nationwide and generates a £40 billion tax take for the Exchequer to fund public services, is reflected in the Brexit negotiations.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning to you both. I have a question on London's smaller cultural establishments, which is an issue that's very important to me. And I'd like to know what you're doing to protect smaller cultural establishments such as music venues and small theatres.
Do you want to answer
Yes,
that, Amy?
indeed. I have anticipated your interest in this, as I know, Assemblymember Copley, you are a great supporter of small cultural establishments, particularly the new Diorama Theatre, which is one of London's gems.
Thank you.
Tiny but powerful.
They are.
So we have supported and appointed London's first ever culture at risk officer to safeguard our well-loved places and spaces that are at risk of being lost. We mentioned the loss of Lgbt venues. London's also lost 35% of its grassroots live music venues, 25% of its pubs, and in the first year of the Culture at Risk Officer here, we have helped nearly 200 cultural spaces across the capital, and that includes theatres, cinemas. For the first time in a decade, the number of grassroots music venues in London has remained stable for 2 years. We work very closely with the licensing authorities, so although we do not have formal licensing powers, I have worked with the Electric Ballroom, Camden Council, to increase its capacity for live music, worked with GAY in Westminster to extend its opening hours and to help mitigate the increase in business rates. I am aware that business rates are a huge pressure, especially for small independent venues, and we're working with local authorities to help reduce that burden. We've also been working to strengthen planning policies. So we've introduced the Agent of Change principle, which is already being used to protect, for example, the Ministry of Sound Club in Southwark and the George Tavern, an iconic pub and music venue in Tower Hamlets. For the first time, we've have a dedicated pubs protection policy in the draft new London plan, which has already been used in individual cases, for example, the Manby Arms in East London. We've developed the LGBT Charters venue, as has been mentioned, and I spoke about the Joiners Arms, but we've also been able to use that to help save the Compton Cross, which is formerly known as Molly Moggs in Soho, and the City of Quebec. And the Cultural Infrastructure Plan. For the first time ever, the Mayor is planning for culture in the same way that we plan for other infrastructure in our city. It's the first citywide evidence base of cultural infrastructure to inform our planning and our policy. And this will give local authorities the tools to be able to see the cultural facilities in their own and neighbouring boroughs, allowing them to track where there are opportunities, where there are challenges, where there are clusters and trends, and to make fully informed planning decisions in that matter.
Well, thank you for that very comprehensive answer. You talked about the cultural infrastructure plan. Is that going to, I believe it's the map cultural venues.
Yes.
Does that include small theatres across
Yes, it
London
will.
as well?
It will include theatres. It also includes artist workspaces, LGBT venues. That's being phased in. So I can certainly let you know the date when theatres will be included.
And just finally, in terms of ensuring that sort of all parts of the GLA family are sort of joined up, have you been sort of talking to TfL, for example, about when they're, planning a new station redevelopment? I mean, you talked about Electric Ballroom. Obviously, there's a plan to redevelop Camden Town, Tube Station.
Yes.
Where cultural venues could be at risk because of much needed, necessary regeneration transport regeneration project.
Yes.
Are you liaising with TfL about that?
Absolutely. And one case we're particularly proud of is the Scala music venue in King's Cross that's been there for many years, well loved. And we've been working in conjunction with TfL because that area is being regenerated. Of course, you know, TfL have their priorities, we have our priorities, but we're able to come together and work in partnership, and that's been working very well.
Thank you very much.
Assemblymember Prince.
Good afternoon. Well, morning still. When you visit the boroughs, do you invite the Assembly member along?
Are you addressing me?
Yeah.
Yes. Sometimes I do, yes.
What criteria do you use for inviting the Assembly member? And
Are you thinking of something in particular?
well, yes and no is the short answer. You mentioned earlier that you visited Havering,
Yes,
which is one of my boroughs.
yes.
That's the first I've heard of it.
Pardon me, I didn't hear that.
That's the first I've heard of it, that you were visiting Havering.
I'm terribly sorry about that. I actually work very closely with the local authority there to set up the night surgery there, and I have to say the London Borough of Havering is absolutely doing exemplary work in the nighttime economy. I was so incredibly impressed with the work that's going on there, the work that the health service, that street pastors, and you also have the fantastic Sapphire Leisure Centre that is just opened.
Indeed.
But
my question was, what criteria do you use as to whether or not to invite the Assembly member?
There's no set criteria. So I'd be very pleased to go back to Havering, and perhaps you could show me some of the places that I may have missed.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Assemblymember Arnold.
Thank you, Chair. My question is addressed to the Night Czar. Amy, thank you for reminding us that the nighttime economy is so much more than the popular focus on drink, drugs and rock and roll. And during your answer to the Chair, you ably set out the breadth and the complexity and the vital economic importance of our city's nighttime economy. But for me, it's about how Londoners now can feel part of that. And I'm reminded that the second of the Mayor's 10 principles outlined in his vision document says that he wants to provide vibrant opportunities for all Londoners, regardless of age, disability, gender identity, race, religion and sexual orientation.
Yes.
Now, you picked up the issue about the loss of venues for London's LGBT plus community in answering Assemblymember Kitchen's question. Can I now just refer you to an area that's impacted on London's black and minority ethnic community performers, so
Yes.
performers from that heritage. And you will recall that, as I do, because I campaigned against it quite vociferously, the Mayor's, the Metropolitan's Form 696.
Yes.
And the threat that posed to promoted music events.
Yes.
And we worked through that over the years. So now we have a new voluntary partnership approach. Can you tell us if you've been monitoring that, particularly in terms of performers, where this is a vital place for them, these vital places for them from BAME communities?
Yes. Thank you very much for that question, and it is hugely important. I'm very happy to say that the Mayor and the Metropolitan Police and I work very closely to get 696 scrapped. It is in the bin, which is exactly where it should be. And I have to say that it no longer exists in London. What does concern me is that this form does exist in certain places around the rest of the country. So I would urge the government to address that issue. I have monthly meetings with MOPAC, with the central licensing officers from the Metropolitan Police and my colleagues here at the GLA. We watch this very closely, This has been a partnership approach. The police recognised that 696 was not fit for purpose and that it should be scrapped. That was a decision that was taken by the police. And so we are working with them to develop a partnership approach. Okay. We are now in the formation stage of that. Yeah, I'm very happy to report back as soon as we have more news as to when that will actually be starting up.
Okay, and I would just ask you to add credit to Feargal Sharkey and the Assembly members who were involved in that campaign as well, because it was well on its way to this new model. And basically what I'm saying is, have you received any sort of positive feedback from, grime or garage or R&B
Absolutely.
performers?
Yes. So the diversity of London's nightlife is our strength. This is what makes our nighttime economy and culture the best in the world.
So have they fed back positively?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. I just want to go on quickly about disability. And there's a quote here that I've got, that during a visit, the Economy Committee members heard from Disability Backup, an organisation I know well from my constituency, who said management at some nighttime venues have good intentions regarding accessibility, and most nighttime venues claim to be accessible until you actually get there to use them, and it becomes a different story. What monitoring and what work have you done to ensure greater accessibility for Londoners?
Yes, that's very important. And the London Music Board Diversity Roundtable was chaired by the London Music Board member Suzanne Bull, who is the Chief Executive of Attitude is Everything, an excellent organisation that campaigns and has very practical solutions for venues to become more accessible. We know that venues in London are not as accessible as they could be, some of them. And this is a challenge. Many venues face financial challenges, but we are working very closely with Attitude is Everything and the Music Venue Trust to find ways to improve access and infrastructure at venues. Access is partly about physical challenges to buildings, but also about attitude and training of staff. And Sam Ranke, who's an actor and campaigner and is a member of the Nighttime Commission, works in this aspect as well.
Can I just cut you, because I'm running out of time. In a year's time, will you be able to say that there has been a percentage increase in accessibility across London? And in order to do that, you must now have some idea about how bad it is. I mean, I want the sort of factual stuff that you're doing.
Yes. Well, the Nighttime Commission report certainly will be looking at those numbers. So I'm looking forward to the publication of the report.
Okay, I've run out of time.
Assemblymember McCartney.
Thank you. My question is around safety at night, and I want to pick up something that was started by Caroline Russell about licensing. I'm very pleased you're looking at possibly developing a London standard for licensed premises. And one of the concerns that I've raised before is that venues that report to police sexual assault or harassment on their premises can often feel that that is used against them at any renewal of their licensing application, rather than looking at it as a positive sign of a good premises. So can I ask you, what are you doing about working with the police to make sure that that is taken as such? And do you also think there's a need to change licensing laws by legislation to ensure that every premises has to have a really good policy in place?
I know Assemblymember Duval has been working in this area and feels very passionately about it, and rightly so. Creating a safe and welcoming environment at night, especially for women, is one of my top priorities. And in the recent Police and Crime Plan public consultation, only 39% of respondents agreed that London is a safe place for women and girls. But we have to realise that it is a safe place for women. There is a gap between perception and reality. Women don't always feel safe at night, and this is what we have to address. Women and girls are far more likely to be victims of certain types of crime. Almost 9 in 10 victims of sexual offences in London were female, and this is clearly not good enough. Our job is to ensure that women not only are safe, but feel safe. So the Mayor has written to the Minister for Women to ask for her support in the Women's Night Safety Charter, and also to ask what more can be done to compel licensed premises to report incidents of sexual harassment as requested by Assemblymember Duval.
Okay, so you are in favour of changing legislation if it needs to be?
Absolutely. Anything that ensures that London is safe, safer for women, and that women feel safe in London is a top priority.
Okay, thank you. But if there's anything you want to add?
And yes, I mean, probably not as chair of the Nighttime Commission, but we are looking at this area because public safety is one of the issues that's come up, and it's broader than just women. It's an acute issue to do with women and their perception of safety. And the research that we've carried out quite intensively supports what Amy has just said, that there is a perception versus reality. And there is a perception, particularly if you come from outer London, if you're an older Londoner, if you don't use the nighttime economy frequently, that London is less safe. Actually, it's not borne out when you compare it with international visitors who think of us as a very safe environment, particularly at night. But their perception is everything, and we've got to do more to address that. Personally, I'm not in favour of changing the licensing law. There is an obligation, and this is without my commission hat on, with my day job hat on, representing the venues. There is already an obligation under the Licensing Act to make sure that you take every single step you can to address public safety, and that it's there in your licensing conditions. So there's no need to provide a belt and braces approach, in much the same way that you are required under your licensing applications to look at equality, to look at accessibility, to look at protection of children.
That's a very broad definition open to interpretation.
It is, but equally, if you have an area or a venue where you think that there is a particular issue of concern, then good and responsible operators, and this is what we'll be looking to help, will be putting forward voluntary measures to ensure that there is a safe environment both within their premises and without. I think the issue that we're talking about, more particularly where I wanted to pick up on something you said, is about the robustness of the data on which we are making judgments and value judgments and making evidence and planning. And at the moment, that data is not sufficiently robust, and there are areas where responsible venues are doing everything they can and find that they are penalised, and that's something that we've got to address, and we're working with the central licensing unit within the Met to address that, and also at a national government level to make sure that whether we're looking at safety or whether we're looking at drugs or whether we're looking at knives, venues that do their job, police the streets and police their own venues, aren't penalised for doing that good job.
I think the concern we have is the word voluntary. We think every licensed premises should have to have a standard code. So a London standard would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Assemblymember Boff.
Why are LGBT venues particularly to be saved over and above venues for other populations?
Sorry, whom are you addressing?
Well, who wants to answer? Ms. Lamé.
I think that there's an importance in saving venues and helping venues to survive and thrive, venues that help make London, London. And our diversity is our calling card around the world. And if we lose venues and those spaces that help make London a welcoming and open city, then I would anticipate that would affect us in a negative way.
I'm agreeing with everything you're saying.
Yes.
But why particularly LGBT venues?
LGBT venues are just part of the mix of venues
so
that our culture at risk officers...
You're not going to particularly focus on LGBT venues?
No, LGBT venues is just part of the venues. I was just addressing the question that Assemblymember Pigeon raised around specifically LGBT venues, but I'm very happy to talk about the work we've been doing to save pubs, to save grassroots live music venues. I've been working with your colleague Assemblymember O'Connell to save a pub in Thornton Heath in his area. And so these are all cultural venues that are really important to the vibrancy and the diversity of London.
So there isn't any particular priority attached to LGBT venue
It is
over and above
a
any
priority, as all culture at-risk venues are a priority.
Okay. And I just wondered, in the case of the Joiners Arms, was it your intervention that resulted in the planning condition that the venue should be an LGBT venue?
Well, as all Assembly members know, our powers here in City Hall are limited, but one of the powers we do have is convening power. And so I was able to bring different stakeholders around the table, stakeholders who were not previously speaking to each other, and actually enable that conversation to happen and to work through some of the challenges that was being faced.
So you would perhaps claim to be the catalyst behind that planning decision?
Yes, not behind the planning decision, the catalyst behind creating the conditions and the conversation that enabled that to happen.
Okay. As far as I can see, gay venues started closing when I stopped going to them. And
they're obviously missing you.
Yeah, but they are, and I think a lot of other people took that decision as well. And I don't know why they require a particular emphasis. Would you be supportive also of, do you regret also the closure of the White Horse that's in Shoreditch a couple of years back, which is a particularly heterosexual clientele?
I look after all venues and culture at risk with my culture at risk officer. We don't make value judgments or, but there are particular communities within London that are more vulnerable than others. People from minority and black and ethnic backgrounds, for example, very proud to have played a role in working with the owners of Club 414 in Brixton, an important community venue that we were able to save. And so LGBT venues is just, as I said, part of the mix. Pubs are in there, clubs, grassroots live music venues, and perhaps Assemblymember Boff, you'd like to come out and visit some of the LGBT venues with me. I'd be very welcome to take you around.
It'll be like going down memory lane. Incidentally, Joiners Arms, to be fair, I mean, I always thought, because I used to live quite close to it,
yes.
I used to frequent it, but I was more considered it to be a place where hipsters could get their drugs rather than a particularly LGBT venue.
Mm.
Oh,
It was known for drugs.
well,
It
was known for drugs.
Well, okay.
I would think that, with your beard, you'd fit in quite well with the hipsters.
Yeah, absolutely, he would. Yes. They don't like me for some reason. Can I move on to what might be the impact you think of the Mayor's refusal to renew Uber's licence? What impact will that have on the nighttime economy?
That was a decision by TfL.
Yeah, but what effect do you think it will have on the nighttime economy? You made a reference earlier to collecting data and doing research, and you also made reference to the transport.
Yes.
You welcomed the night tube. Now, Uber is one of those things that gets people home or to venues. What research have you done to find out what impact that will have on the nighttime economy?
Yes, I'll turn over to my colleague Kate here.
Thank you.
Well, we are carrying out research with TfL on a range of transport at night and transport infrastructures. There is no doubt that any decision, a final decision on Uber will have an impact on the nighttime economy because it creates issues to do with accessibility and it impacts on cost. I mean, our work as a Nighttime Commission is looking at protecting and promoting diversity and vibrancy of the nighttime economy as a whole and issues that are affecting delivery of that and cutting across it. One of them is cost, one of them is affordability, and the big issue that comes up time and time again is transport. So it's a big focus of our work going forward to make sure that Transport for London can give us that data. At the moment, a lot of what we're finding when we talk to Transport for London or the police or other areas is that the data simply isn't there or isn't robust enough to make evidence-based policy recommendations or evidence-based planning decisions. And so that is one of the key areas that we will be looking to have better information going forward.
And can, obviously this was a mayor's decision through TfL to withdraw the licence. Can we expect you to have an independent view of the Uber's situation, rather than one that just parrots what the mayor is saying?
As the Commission?
As the Commission.
Every single recommendation and view that the Commission puts forward in its report will be an independent decision made by the 26 commissioners who I work with, and all of it will be taken independently of the mayor's position or TfL's position.
Have you met the mayor?
I have not met the mayor. I have, however, had 3 meetings with the Deputy Mayor for Culture and Creative Industries since I've been appointed.
Do you think it would be a good idea to meet the mayor?
I think it would be extremely helpful to meet the mayor when I've got something that's helpful to present to him, but at the moment we're sifting through a vast amount of data and research, and we're trying to distill it down into some practical steps and recommendations. So I have put a request in that we can meet the mayor in the autumn when we have something meaningful to present as a commission.
We look forward to that. Ms Lamé opened up by saying that the nighttime economy is a top priority for the mayor. Bearing in mind he hasn't met you and he didn't meet your predecessor, I wonder what a low priority might look like. Anyway, thank you very much.
Assemblymember Desai.
Good morning, Ms Lamé. You've talked in very general terms and quite understandably in your opening statement about Londoners needing a good night's sleep, working with the MAT and MOPAC to develop a consistent licensing approach. As I say, all very laudable aims. But you will recall a meeting in Tower Hamlets, top end of Brick Lane, a meeting which I incidentally only found out through the Eastern Advertiser. I wasn't invited to it the day before. And the feeling at that meeting was, I think this was one of your surgeries, that the whole approach to the nighttime economy was one of looking at it in terms of the pound sign. There were about 100 residents there, and they were talking about the experience of antisocial behavior and so on. So what work have you done since then to dispel this image or perception? And in particular, what did you learn from that meeting and from all your other meetings that has made you take a different approach? Can you give us some more details about how you're progressing your vision of promoting the safety and well-being of residents as outlined in your nighttime vision?
Yes.
You talked about monthly meetings and so on, but really this is a thing that affects residents out there. They welcome the nighttime economy, but the effects of the nighttime economy, particularly in terms of antisocial behavior. You talked about women's safety quite rightly in response to the question from my colleague, Assemblyman McCartney. But as I said, more general, more specific terms, what have you been doing over the last year?
Yes. So in terms of, first of all, I'd like to say it was great to go to Tower Hamlets and to meet with the residents of Jago estate there and to hear their concerns. And as I outlined earlier, listening to residents, not just through residents' associations, but residents of London everywhere I go around London, is of utmost importance. Now, the safety and well-being of Londoners is my top priority. We know that it's not worth having a night out unless it's a safe night out. And Londoners have been speaking very positively about the way London has changed, even in the past 18 months. The majority see London as a safe and vibrant place at night, which caters for their needs. And thanks to organizations like Drinkaware, alcohol is taking less of a lead role. Young people now in London drink less alcohol than anywhere else in the UK.
Ms. Amy, sorry, I don't wish to be rude, but I'm limited for time. There are other colleagues waiting to answer questions.
Yes.
Can we be specific? What lessons did you learn from the Brick Lane meeting and from your other meetings? And what are you doing generally to dispel this
Yes,
image
well, the
perception
lesson I learned
that
was
all we're
that-
interested in is a pound sign?
Yes, the lesson that I learned is that it's very important to listen to residents. It's also very important to work collaboratively with the local authority. I was invited to that meeting by the Mayor of Tower Hamlets to speak and to listen to the concerns of the residents.
Assemblymember Hall.
Right, sorry, I was amazed by that answer. I've just looked up your social media, your Twitter accounts, both the Night Czar and your own one. You said that you advertise things through your social media. You said that in answer to a question from one of my colleagues. But the email address that you've got on both of those accounts just says mayor@london.gov. Do you not have your own email address?
Yes, I do. That is the public email address. And all of those emails do come to me and my team.
But it doesn't encourage people to actually email you about specifics.
People email me every day, and people contact me through various social media channels. And I have an excellent team here at the GLA that helps me deal with those issues that arise.
Well, we established your team hasn't made sure that anything's up to date so that people know what you're doing. Kate, if I can ask you, please, are you supportive of the tourism levy?
As a commission, we haven't discussed the tourism levy yet. It will come up in our work programme over the course of the next year. As a representative of UK hospitality, no, the industry is not supportive of a bed tax. We don't feel it is the right way to develop positive, pragmatic partnerships between industry and other stakeholders, and we believe that a voluntary approach to identifying some of the challenges that are faced and seeking specific local solutions to overcome them is the best way forward.
So you don't agree with it personally, and I have to say I completely agree with you. So how are you going to convince Amy and the Mayor about that?
We, as an organisation at UK Hospitality, we're commissioning research to look at the negative impact that a bed tax would have, not just in London, but in other cities around the UK. We don't believe that that's the way forward, but we do support bids and work at a local level to develop local solutions. Part of the problem in London and in other major cities is that you would have Airbnb and other home sharing platforms that wouldn't be paying those kind of taxes, and you would only be hitting those people who are staying. And anything that makes London or other cities uncompetitive with the rest of the world isn't helpful if we're trying to grow.
I'm sorry, but you're here as chairman of the Nighttime Commission. I know you've said it's your other hat, but I don't think we want to hear about your other hat.
Absolutely.
That might put you in some sort of conflict then.
In those cases, that's where we would have to debate it as a commission, and we would have to see as a commission whether we wanted to make recommendations in those areas. I apologise for straying into personal.
Well, it's just that obviously with social media, and Amy has just said how much she uses social media to let people know what she's doing. With social media, when you make comments about things, they're picked up and you'll seem to be the chair of this committee. Amy, what do you think the impact would be on the tourism levy? What do you think it would have on the nighttime economy and the businesses that operate in the nighttime economy?
I'm very much looking forward to the recommendations that the Commission put forward. So
no, that's not the question. If I could just ask you to concentrate on the question, what impact do you think that the tourism levy would have?
I would have to look at the data that will be presented by the Commission and their report.
But do you have a view?
I can't elaborate on a view unless I have that data in front of me. But I'm very happy to write to you and give you a full answer to your question at a later date.
I was just hoping you might have a view on these such things. Have you actually consulted with any of the businesses in the nighttime economy about proposals for a tourism levy?
No, I haven't.
Do you not think that you should, bearing in mind that the Mayor is constantly mentioning it? I mean, that we've found loads of quotes, and it's actually in his draft economic development strategy. So Do you not think that you should start to get feelings of what people
I think that's an excellent recommendation, Assemblymember Hall, and I will take that away and look at that.
Do you not think that your very good people supporting you should have come up with the idea that you should be looking into that? There's another view of yours. I would like your thoughts, not what's written down, your thoughts on that. What do you think, Amy? What do you think about that?
I think it's important to take a very balanced approach to the nighttime economy, and I look forward to the recommendations that the Commission put forward.
Okay. Going back to really social media, since it's been mentioned before. Kate, your Facebook feed, you've written negatively, very negatively, about the Conservative Party. What do you have to say about that?
I don't think that I've put any negative comments about any party out.
Okay, well, let me help
I make
you.
personal comments about issues that I'm interested in, but I don't believe I've made any comments.
Let me help you, because if your colleague is saying she uses her Twitter feed...
I'm not sure that that's relevant to me as a...
Well, it is relevant to us on this side, actually, because...
Hang on, Assemblymember Hall. Yes, Lynn.
Ruling about personal issues around that. Can you just give some clarity about whether we're engaging in that? Because if it's said in relation to, presumably, about Brexit, I don't think that's necessarily aimed at the Conservatives. Is it to do with the day job, or is it to do with the Commission's job?
Well,
It's, Chairman, it's to do with if people can be neutral enough to deal with both sides here, and when we read things like somebody's thrilled that somebody's been sacked, and that they need alcohol in order to make our conflicts bearable, how does that help with relationships on both sides?
Yes,
and that's the thing is these.
No. Let me make a ruling on this. I think when the matter was raised earlier, it was in relation to conflict of interest between the chairman's interest in, if I can put it this way, in her day job and this. But similarly, there must be a conflict of interest when you are dealing with an assembly which is made up of Conservatives. And I think that you must answer the question whether or not there is a conflict of interest between your views, as has been suggested by the Assembly member, on a particular political party. Is there a conflict of interest?
I don't believe there is a conflict of interest at all in any view that I express, because I don't believe I've expressed views around particular parties. I have worked for 25 years as a professional lobbyist to make sure that I am neutral when it comes to issues.
I believe that the Assembly member is questioning your neutrality.
I can only give you assurances that I am entirely neutral when it comes to political parties. I work very closely with both sides at a national level and a local level.
Well, I would point out that we do read Twitter feeds. We do read that you're expressing your joy at a Conservative minister being sacked, and that you needed to consume alcohol to make our conference bearable. That doesn't put the situation in a neutral place, quite frankly. I think the problem...
Let's just raise scrutiny up a bit.
Well, I don't think it's scrutiny. Political parties are an important part of this assembly, and if there is a belief by one political party that because of what you have said, you cannot be neutral, that does need to be aired. Clearly, the Assembly member doesn't think you are neutral.
If that is a perception or a belief, then I would need to consider my position, because I don't believe I am critical of one particular party.
Okay. I hear what you say, and
I would happily have a conversation with you outside and separately if that's something that you would like.
I think
I took on the role as chair on a voluntary basis. I'm not a political appointment. I stepped up as one of the commission members to try and help fellow commission members to deliver a report for the mayor. If that's an issue, then I will...
Okay. Given that, can you explain why you were given the resources to do your job properly as the chair of the commission when Philip was not? And I must point out that Philip said he even offered his services for free, which would have saved the taxpayer a considerable amount of money. So why wasn't he taken up on that? And also, why were you given the resources you needed and not Philip? I am asking you because you were part of the commission, so you would have been party to this.
I was part of the commission, but the commissioners who were working with Philip in the meetings were coming to meetings to give their expertise and their time free of time. I wasn't privy to any of the discussions that were happening behind the scenes with Philip, his appointment, or resources with the GLA. I'm not paid. I do just, as I say, I'm a functional chair of the commission, stepping up from being a commissioner to take on a role to deliver a report. You'd have to speak to the GLA as to why those resources were made available. I know that Philip was having conversations with them about additional administrative support, and that was forthcoming in due course.
Okay. Yeah, but at some point you will consider whether the various hats you wear make it appropriate for you to be chair, given my questions to you over the tourism tax. Will you?
Yes, I went through a full open process and that would have been taken into consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Assemblymember Dismore.
Thank you, Chair. I want to ask about nighttime workers because the nighttime economy is typified by low-paid, insecure work, and the number of zero-hours contracts is increasing. Pay is eroded because enhanced hourly rates for antisocial hours have been removed, which makes some workers have to work longer hours to maintain their income. There are even cases of staff not receiving their tips. For example, TV chef Michel Roux Jr. admitted his Le Gavre restaurant keeps all of its 13% service charge and doesn't distribute it to the workers. In February, the Economy Committee recommended the Mayor should research what proportion of night workers receive the London living wage and set out steps to make sure that employers pay the London living wage. Amy, what have you done to promote that recommendation?
Well, London's culture and leisure economy alone at night employs 725,000 people, and that's 1 in 8 Londoners. That's roughly the population of Leeds, and many more people work evening and nights in factories, deliveries, health, policing,
sorry, that's
cleaning.
not answering my question. We've got limited time. I asked, what are you doing in relation to the London living wage, bearing in mind the low pay that's endemic in the nighttime economy?
Yes.
What are you doing to implement the recommendation from the Economy Committee?
Well, I regularly meet with nighttime workers on night surgeries, such as nighttime businesses, venues, working across different areas of the creative industries. I believe strongly that workers in the services industry should keep all tips. I worked as a waitress for many years. Tips can often make the difference between making your rent and going into debt just to cover basic living expenses. And I want to continue to focus on the welfare and needs of London's nighttime workers.
Can you answer my question, please?
Yes, I have answered your question.
Well, you haven't. I asked you specifically about the London living wage, and you talked about all sorts of other things.
Well, I support the London living wage.
What are you doing to promote it?
And I'm working with stakeholders here within the GLA and outside in order to ensure that that happens.
And the Commission has commissioned research to look at the proportion of workers in the core nighttime economy and broader people who are working at night, which is 2 areas of work that we're looking at, to look at what proportion are paid London living wage, what proportion are paid the national living wage, and to make recommendations in those areas around workers at night.
Assemblymember Bacon.
Question to Ms Lamé. When Assemblymember Pigeon was in her session, she asked you specifically whether you were liaising with the Met Police and venues to consider how best to tackle the scourge of drug use and keep Londoners safe. You gave her quite a non-specific answer that used up the rest of her time, which stopped her from asking you a supplementary. So it is a subject that I think everyone in this room is very concerned with. So can you tell me what specific things you have been doing in that regard?
With regards to?
Tackling drug use, particularly at nightclubs.
Drugs are illegal, and anything to do with drugs I leave to the Metropolitan Police Service.
Okay, so is the answer nothing then?
Well, drugs are illegal.
Yes, I know that.
Yes.
But I'm taking you back to the quotation that Assemblymember Pigeon made when Fabric got its licence back. You said, "I would never want anything like that to happen ever again, and we have to do everything we can to prevent that." Was that a generic we, or did you include yourself in that?
I absolutely included myself in that. And
Okay, so
in order to make sure that venues and places at night remain safe,
Yeah.
we have to work in partnership. And so that's why I work with...
But you just said that drugs are illegal and you leave it
Yes.
to the police, and I asked you specifically what you were doing.
Yes.
So I think everyone in the room probably draws the conclusion from that you're doing nothing.
Well, that would be untrue.
So what are you doing then specifically?
Yes. So specifically, and I want to make it clear that drug use does not belong solely to the night. I really
did that earlier.
I refute this idea that people are
Sorry,
only
Ms. Lamé,
that
I
drugs
don't mean to
is
be rude,
only an
but
issue.
you
that,
may be unaware that we are on time, and so time
Yes,
runs
but I
out
also think
during
it's
your
important
answers. But you have
to-
made that point already, and everyone in the room understands that. So the question is, what are you specifically doing about this problem?
Okay, just let me refer to my notes here.
Is the clock pausing at this point?
So one of my jobs is to make sure venues are working effectively with the police, to ensure that venues are open and enjoyable, but also to ensure the safety of clubbers. I reiterate that drug testing and anything to do with drugs is a matter for the Metropolitan Police. I support them in their work with clubs and other businesses in the nighttime economy, but anything to do with drugs, I leave to the Metropolitan Police.
Okay, in that case then, I think the statement that you made, everyone in this room now knows was just a platitude, not actually anything that you were promising to do yourself. And the action you're taking is actually nothing. Can I ask you, going back to another Assembly member's question, it's linked to it, have you ever visited Bexley or Bromley?
No, but actually I had a brilliant conversation with a cab driver who was from Bexley, and he was telling me how vibrant the nighttime economy is. So I do hope that that's an invitation for me to visit the area.
Right, okay. I was hoping for something a bit more substantial than that. When you do visit Bexley or Bromley, bearing in mind it is my constituency, and we've heard from two separate Assembly members today that you visited their constituencies without extending them an invitation. What criteria do you use to decide whether or not to invite the local Assembly member to your meetings?
Is that an invitation? Because if it is, I'd very much like to take you up on visiting Bexley and your area.
If you would
and
extend me
learning
the
more about
courtesy,
the
as long as my
nighttime
diary is free, I would happily attend with you.
Brilliant.
Of course.
Shall we set up a coffee and set up a date?
Why not? The point that I'm trying to make, though, Ms. Lamé, is that Assembly members, the Mayor, when he makes visits to Assembly members' constituencies, is very diligent about making sure that the local Assembly member is invited. Now, not on every occasion could an Assembly member attend, of course, but the invitation is always extended. And I think it would do you a great deal of good if you extended the same courtesy to Assembly members that the Mayor does.
Well, the Mayor doesn't actually extend that courtesy. I have to correct you on that.
Was that a question?
No, it was a suggestion. I'm finished. Thank you.
Assembly Member Sahota.
Hi. I particularly want to talk about the impact of Brexit. What conversations have you had with businesses regarding Brexit, and particularly the workers in the nighttime economy, how this will influence them, how will it impact on the nighttime economy?
I think, Kate, if you could talk about the work you're doing around Brexit.
Yes. As I said earlier to your colleague, Assemblymember Duval, the Commission itself is not doing additional research in this area where it's relying upon existing evidence that has been provided about the impact of Brexit on the nighttime economy and London at night and the vibrancy of London at night, and is supporting the work of the national trade bodies to make those representations to the Mayor and to national government to make sure we have the supportive system we need to address the concerns that Brexit raises.
So have there been any conversation with businesses at all? By you, Amy, for example?
Pardon me, are you addressing me?
Yes.
Yes. Asking me what I'm doing regarding Brexit.
What conversation you've had with businesses on the impact?
Yes, so as you know, the Mayor's doing everything he can to advocate for the best possible Brexit deal for Londoners and for businesses. And the Mayor commissioned research on the impact of a hard Brexit. This is an issue that is of huge importance to the nighttime economy and culture, and it is a topic that is regularly brought up by workers, by Londoners, and the effects that it will have. So, I mean, I think, you know, there's obviously, we need a robust approach to Brexit here in London, and I work with London and partners to ensure that London remains attractive to international investors and to firms in London, for example, through the Mayor's International Business Programme.
Okay. And the other, of course, thing is it has been the huge hike in the business rates.
Yes.
It's had a huge impact on the nighttime economy.
Yes.
What have you done to facilitate discussion with the government, right, to see to
Yes.
minimise the impact of business rate, which in London have gone up about 27%, right, and the rest of the country by 9%, right?
Yes. So the Mayor continues to lobby the government around business rates and has been lobbying for us to be able to control business rates ourselves here in London and to actually keep the money. In terms of sort of, you know, very practical approaches, I've been working with a number of venues with my Culture at Risk officer to help venues that are at risk because their business rates have increased so much, coupled with the increase in rents and the rise in costs of employment, insurance, across the board. I think it's fair to say there's been a certain amount of economic instability. And so it's important that we take a bespoke approach to each venue. I mean, you know, there are a number of them. I'm happy to talk to you about those offline, but they're, of course, commercially sensitive.
Katie, is this something which the Commission might be looking into also?
Again, it's similar to Brexit. We have received a wider range of evidence that looks at the context within which the nighttime economy and London at night is developing. We've taken the views and received evidence in from various stakeholder groups about the impact of business rates, and they have come up time and time again. It also ties in with the strand of our work that we're looking at, because the main focus of our activity is around what are the barriers to delivering the vision for a 24-hour London. Transport I mentioned already. The second one that comes up is cost and affordability. And obviously the more business costs that are imposed, the more the cost becomes passed on to the consumer. So it is an area that we are looking at actively.
Thank you very much.
Assemblymember O'Connell.
Thank you very much. Just a couple of points to both of you. Amy, you probably have got the hint that it's an idea to give Assembly members heads up, but I know you've come to Croydon on several occasions.
Yes.
And thank you for that, and I'll be pleased to join you next time if my diary
Great.
permits. But it's on that subject. Croydon, particularly like other town centres in previous years, going back, suffered a lot of antisocial behaviour, a nighttime economy that was very difficult. And it took some managing by Met Police and by councillors through the licensing laws and through other laws to manage that risk down. So do you see a tension still between expanding nighttime economies, bear in mind we still have the 24-hour licensing capability, and also keeping those town centres safe and well for their citizens? Do you still see work to be done and a tension around that, either of you?
I think there's always more work to be done, and the answer to that is partnership. Croydon is a great example of how partnership working has enabled the town centre to make it more attractive and safer. Areas like Havering, I know I keep bringing up Havering, but you know, Romford High Street has made an incredible turnaround, and that is through partnership working, the excellent partnership working that they're doing there. And so it's important, for example, through the Borough Champions Network, that we're able to share that best practice, and that boroughs have a forum to be able to learn from each other, so that we're able to say what's going on, what's working well for Havering could possibly work well for Enfield, for example, as Enfield develops its nighttime economy.
Would the Commission have that as a piece of work to look at things like reviewing, for example, the 24-hour licensing, which was brought in to some while back to produce a kind of 24-hour cafe culture, that kind of went a bit wrong, in my view. Will the Commission be looking at that?
The Commission is certainly looking at that dynamic tension that you referred to. There is always going to be that tension between economic development, residents, businesses, and the needs of local communities and local visitors. So we're looking at how do we make sure that you have a vibrant, dynamic city at night that works for everybody, and how do we minimise any of the problems that might arise as a result of that.
Okay, and lastly, a brief point, a brief comment. It's really also for the record to thank you, Amy, for the work you've done with the Wetherspoons pub that we unfortunately has been closed, and thank you for Ed up there. So that something's happening. And lastly, on that point, the London plan is under scrutiny still. Hopefully, you'll continue to be working with strengthening, particularly the pubs amendment, or what some colleagues fondly call the O'Connell amendment, to strengthen the pubs protection. So, simple,
Yes.
will you continue to support
absolutely, that? Absolutely. And I'd like to put on the record that the meetings that I've had with Assemblymember O'Connell have been very fruitful, very productive. Again, this is a great way of showing how partnership working it can have positive results, and hopefully we'll be able to keep Flores Andes, even though we're not able to save it, that it will at least stay a pub.
Yeah,
that's very important.
There's still work to be done, but thank you, Amy. Thank you.
Assemblymember Eshalomi.
Thank you. Hello, Amy. Hello, Kate. This August, on the 19th, will be 2 years since the first services on the night tube started on the Central and Victoria line. I was fortunate to be on the first one leaving from Brixton, obviously, which was really great. Yeah. And we know that some of the impact that... we know that actually London now has a number of night tube services, so we're actually, getting in line with some of the other major cities. What impact do you feel that the night tube has had on the nighttime economy?
Well, the impact, I'm glad that you were on that first Victoria line night tube train, and I had the great opportunity to launch the first night tube service on the Piccadilly line. And I've seen over and over again, no matter where I travel in London, how the night tube and the night overground have impacted positively. I mentioned earlier the financial impact of £171 million growth to the nighttime economy, cutting journey times by an average of 20 minutes. When I was on the first night overground train that went from Dalston to New Cross Gate, it was amazing to see so many people that were working in the nighttime economy getting home safely, getting home quickly. Previously, their journey had involved several buses and night buses, and they were so pleased. So I think this is opening up a huge opportunity for us, for workers, for people who want to, perhaps expand where they're exploring at night. It also enables people to either stay local or explore other areas of London as well. You can have a night out in Vauxhall and end up in Waltham Forest by taking that night Victoria line. And I think it's opening up London to lots of opportunities.
Just on that, you created that figure, which is great, and there's been some additional work by London and partners, London First and Voltaire partners, in terms of that figure. They quoted a figure of 12 million. In addition, that report also highlighted that the night tube would help in terms of longer operating hours for bars, clubs, restaurants, cinemas, bowling alleys. And I think obviously we do know that London has already had that option and they were able to use the night bus. Do you feel that there's been any changes in some of those opening hours as a result of the night tube?
Well, as you know, every borough has their own approach to licensing and the needs for each particular area. What we're trying to encourage is, perhaps a nudging of opening hours so that we're seeing the possibilities. What would it mean, for example, if a restaurant were able to stay open and turn the tables one more time, say on a Friday or a Saturday night? What kind of impact would that have on a local community? Would that be positive for employment purposes, for sociability purposes? And we, of course, have to keep residents in mind as well. So you know, I think that, again, this is an ongoing conversation. We'll be getting the figures 2 years on from the Night Tube later this year, and I'm very much looking forward to getting those figures and seeing what the impact has been 2 years on.
Yeah, like I said, rightly so, it is the local boroughs that make decisions on licensing, but
Yes.
I think it would be great to know if specifically you're going to commission any detailed work on that, so that we can get a true picture of the range of different venues across London, and the ones, you know, definitely closer to some of those night tube stations.
Yes. Through my work with the Borough Champions Network, we're encouraging every local authority to develop their own nighttime strategy. And certain boroughs already have one, others are devising one. This is one of the purposes of the Borough Champions Network, is to be able to share this good practice. And so it's important, you know, that boroughs are able to take a balanced approach to this.
Yeah.
So I'm very happy to support the boroughs that you look after. I mean, Lambeth is a great example of nighttime economy that's flourishing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. No, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Assemblymember Both.
We've run out of questions on our side, to be honest. So we've got 1 minute left. So there's something that I was really, really curious about the Joiners Arms and the planning permission. And that was, you know, it's now supposed to be, planning permission it's got to be an LGBT venue. How do you check that the people are going are LGBT?
There's no, it's important to note, Assemblymember Boff, that it is, you can't legislate for people who are in a particular venue, yes? But we have set guidelines of what an LGBT venue might look like. I'm sure you're familiar with many of them, as you said earlier. And I very much like your input on this, and to see, you know, how we might be able to strengthen that, and make sure that LGBT venues are welcoming to absolutely everyone in London. While particular venues might cater for certain communities, you know, this is London. Everywhere is open. We are open. Well, and so I should feel as comfortable inviting, you know, a straight friend along to an LGBT venue.
I accept that. Gay clubs have always been like that, to my knowledge. I mean, you see, I just don't understand how you're going to establish it. I mean, a lot of straight people know all the lyrics to Kylie, and how do you tell? How do you tell? I think
if Kylie Minogue is your test of being LGBT, I urge you to look again at that definition.
All right, Tory time is up. Assemblymember Cooper.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to, I'm going to ask you about three slightly diverse areas, but it's all relating to Outer London, which a number of colleagues have touched upon, and obviously Gareth talked about Bexley and Bromley, but I'm going to focus mine more on Merton because that's in my constituency. But before I talk about that, can I just ask you about the funding? We've got the Good Growth Fund, and we've had round one. Very disappointingly, almost all of it went to inner London areas. It's a big fund. The 24-hour vision talks about that funding being a way to unlock the vibrancy of nightlife in outer London. The second round has literally just opened.
Yes.
What are we going to do to make sure that there's you know, a fairer opportunity for the outer London boroughs to get hold of some of that good growth funding to stimulate the nighttime economy and also to fulfil the Mayor's 24-hour vision?
Well, I agree with you, and it's important that outer boroughs, I mean, I think increasingly these boundaries are being blurred anyway, but what has traditionally been seen as outer London boroughs have an equal chance of getting that funding. So I'm very happy to look into that. And very happy to discuss that with you. I don't sit on the decision-making panel for that, but I'm happy to connect you with people that do, and to make sure that the voices of outer London boroughs are heard as equally as those in inner London.
Well, I'm sure a number of other colleagues will also, for example, my colleague Keith Prince, who represents Havering and Redbridge, and a number
Yes.
of, and Joanne, who represents Enfield and Haringey, would be interested in those discussions. So I
Yes.
think it's really important to make sure that there's a sense of fairness, and obviously geographically, however much we might blur the differences between inner and outer London, and I'm going to come on to that in a minute, there is a need, I think, to be seen that there's fairness taking place here.
Absolutely. I completely agree.
Okay. I just want to ask maybe Kate this time about London and Partners, which one of you mentioned earlier on. Can you give us a bit more detail about how you're working with London and Partners to get people to drive, more tourism? How are they promoting Outer London? What are they doing on that? And what are you doing to work with them on that?
Well, we're very fortunate that the CEO of London and Partners is one of the commissioners. So we have that ability to draw on her expertise and authority when we have our commission meetings to discuss this. One of the work streams that we're looking at is how we promote London and who is promoting London and which audiences are we promoting London to. So London and Partners have a role and responsibility for promoting London as an international destination. So they are particularly outward looking and encouraging investment. And one of the
Yes,
bits
I
that
know
we're
what
looking
London
at,
and Partners do, and I have also had
Sorry.
Laura Citron in front of another committee, so she's talked about that. What I'm saying is, what are you doing specifically to promote Outer London, working with and through London and Partners specifically?
Sorry, I was going to come on to answer that. I apologise. What we're asking as part of the Nighttime Commission is to make sure that they are not London-centric, that they're not central London-centric, that there is life beyond SW1 and the sort of the Zone 1. And we're working with them as a commission to look at how we can ensure that their forthcoming promotions that they're looking at look at the areas of London that are more diverse, more eclectic, so that we can spread people out and promote Outer London boroughs.
Can you give me a for example of what I might see as being that beyond SW1 situation? How is that going to be demonstrated to me?
Well, at the moment we are formulating the thoughts and the recommendations, but the areas that we've talked about within the Commission are Barking and Dagenham, and how we can look at some of the areas and things that they're doing there around Guy Fawkes and how that might be a model for moving forward. There are discussions around music festivals in Ealing and Croydon and north of London, and looking at, if you're sort of moving then in, if you're the latest promotion where they're looking at promoting London, Paris and to East Coast millennials, looking at the Shoreditches, Holstons, Doxton, Dalstons.
No, I'm definitely interested in Outer London. And if you look, for example, and I'm going to use Merton in this case, Wimbledon has got more than one theatre. It's also got the historical links with William Morris, the use of the River Wandle, which also actually impacts onto my other colleagues' Croydon and Sutton constituency. There's a lot of really vibrant, interesting things there that I would have thought in terms of tourism would be of huge interest. So can I commend Merton to you?
You can certainly commend Merton to me. I have visited several of the theatres and used it frequently. As a commission, we're trying not to be individual location specific, but to be making more general recommendations about ensuring that Londoners know the diverse nature of what's going on in London and what the culture and vibrancy is, and that is more accessible, as well as what we're doing to promote international. But there will be a stream of recommendations around tourism and the messages that London and Partners will be taking.
And finally, I just want to pick up on an area that was touched on by my colleague Umesh Desai, in terms of the balance between local residents and their needs and making Outer London more vibrant. And I do think there is a difference between Inner London and Outer London. Could you just say something a little bit about how you're bringing the residents in the Outer London boroughs completely on board for making things more vibrant?
Well, our work programme over the summer as a commission is for all of the commissioners to go out and go visit each of the boroughs. We're spreading it out between us because we're all sort of part-time working on the commission, so that we do get out and experience the nighttime economy in all of those diverse Outer London boroughs. But our focus and our attention has been very much on Outer London. How do you define it? How do we know what it means? Who's in and who's out of those definitions? And how do we make sure that we're aware and capture the views and concerns of residents? And I think you're absolutely right. London is a collection of villages. And what we're finding when we go out and talk as a commission to people and to businesses and to local authorities is it's local problems and local solutions. And it's not a one-size-fits-all.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming and giving us such an interesting session. Can we now move to the motion on the agenda set out in my name, namely that the Assembly notes the answers to the questions asked? Okay. Thank you very much, ladies.
Thank you.
We now come to an item of other business which relates to Val Shawcross, and this is our opportunity to say farewell again to Val. Yeah, sit facing us, Val. You've been there before.
Who's doing the lead-off question, Chair?
Yes.
Hello.
Hi, Val. Well, this is a bittersweet occasion for you, I guess, Val. You and I were together on that day in Marsham Street when we had absolutely no idea what we were going to do, what it was about, and what the GLA was about. Yes, for some of us it hasn't changed that much. And in your time here, building on your time, having been leader of Croydon, you have occupied, I nearly said the commanding heights, but you have had very many important jobs here. And I particularly remember you as chairman of Alfipa. It's a sad occasion you're going. And you represent something that is completely new. You are the first, I think, poacher who turned gamekeeper as far as the Assembly was concerned. And certainly speaking as a member, it was good to feel that we actually knew someone who was holding one of the Mayor's executive posts. I particularly struck in your time here about the report you did on pedestrians when you were crossing Abbey Road and you decided you wouldn't wear any shoes, just as they did in the original picture. I know that you'll want to spend time with your family, but before you go, there are lots of people who want to say nice things about you. And Len is going to say something really nice.
There's lots I could say. But the things that I want to say is this. I've known Val since, I think, the early 90s. We knew we were colleagues in two different roles as former London Borough leaders. And I think you worked in Croydon and built on work of the previous administration, but took it a stage further. I think of that. We talk about the times when we're different and political divides, but certainly in terms of the work that you did in Croydon was solid achievements. Your work here in this building, we worked together before we came into this building. We had a rather strange way of selection process within the Labour Party where we had to run in twin constituencies, and we worked closely on that, and which I enjoyed immensely. It's not much you can say in tense times and difficult times when you're in a competition, but we weren't in a competition, but we were against others in many ways. It was quite a rewarding, and I got to know you even more so than at that particular time. But I think in terms of the work here on both in terms of the fire authority that you undertook, as well as the work in scrutiny, I think was a time of, I think of terms of where the Assembly was generally raising its game on scrutiny. I think some of the best work on scrutiny done in transport, again, jointly with others, was a solid achievement and deserves to be recognised. And I want to say that, you know, I was very fortunate to have you as my deputy as well. And, you know, words that come to be, for me, dependable and reliable, I think are very important words that describe what you go about your business, but what you say you say you will do, you actually do it, which is not often you can say about political colleagues as well, but you did. And then I just really want to say, largely, and I think it's important for us male colleagues to understand this in some ways, and not in some patronising little pat on the head issue, of how tough it is for women in politics, how tough it is to get a platform in many ways. And I think Val has been a leading role, a model role, I think, for other women, but also for men, in terms of how she's gone about her business. And I think that should be recognised. She's been a great servant, not just to my party, but I think to wider local government and regional government. And I wish you well in your retirement with Mick. At long last, you're going to get it. I think I would just want to say one last thing. I don't know what the Mayor thinks of you, Val, and actually I don't really care on this occasion. I think he was very fortunate to have you at this time, in the difficult time that TfL faces. And you being there, and I think in terms of the Chair of the Assembly has mentioned this, and knowing even when we've disagreed, you've respected this Assembly and the role of this Assembly in terms of the way that we've asked you questions and tried to hold you to account for the work that you've done in TfL. And that's good because you've been on this side of the table. Others need to think very carefully about that in the future, who take those positions that you've taken in the past and all the rest of it. So I wish you well for the future, and you know, I'm very pleased that I've been able to work with you. Thank you.
Assemblymember Bacon.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. It's difficult to give a valedictory speech about someone while they're actually sitting in the room, isn't it? The notes I scribbled down talked about Val as though she wasn't here, and she is here, so I'm kind of adjusting my approach as I'm going. This is the end of a very long career that has, I think, amounted to a very huge contribution to London's political scene, and you've ticked an awful lot of the boxes of offices that you could have occupied in that time. Councillor, Borough Leader, founding member of the GLA. There aren't many of those left anymore, are there, Tony? And of course, latterly, Deputy Mayor, but you're also the longest ever serving chair of the London Fire and Emergency Planning Authority, and having occupied that position for around about a quarter of the time that you held it for, I know just how complex and demanding that particular role can be. And I think the time that you occupied that position, when initially we had a sort of independent mayor and then a Labour mayor, and some of the issues that you had to confront at that time, I think are a testament to you that you actually got through that in one piece. I think, in common with Assemblymember Duval, the advantage of your position as Deputy Mayor for Transport is that for the first time, probably in my time here, we've had a Deputy Mayor who has served exclusively on one side of the fence before moving on to the other side of the fence. And that meant that you did actually understand where we're coming from. You did try to accommodate the Assembly in what it wanted to do. And I think that that was very much appreciated by everybody. Now, obviously, you got your CBE in 2002, which is something I'm immensely jealous of, but it was very well deserved in your case. And for me, personally, speaking very personally here, it is very hard to imagine City Hall without you in it. The whole of the decade that I've been here, and same with people like Assemblymember Pigeon, you have been a permanent fixture, very much like the purple carpet that we have here on the floor this morning. And it's very hard to imagine coming into this building with you not being a part of it. So I'd like to thank you for all the service you've done. I think we're on different sides of the fence politically, but all the way along, you've been always very courteous and very helpful in the way that you've dealt with me and with colleagues, and I think that is the mark very much of you. I think it says a great deal about you. So on behalf of the Conservative Group, I'd like to wish you the long and happy retirement that you deserve.
Yeah. Assemblymember Russell.
Thank you. I'm not going to repeat all the marvellous things, although I'm slightly worried about comparing you to a purple carpet. I'm not sure that was quite came out right. I first encountered Val as a campaigner, and I've been campaigning on walking and cycling in London for years. And Val rightly has an incredible reputation with people who are trying to make our streets better for walking and cycling. All across London, as someone who is evidence-based, fair, and who is prepared to listen and actually look at things as they come. And I think that's a really important attribute in a politician. And, you know, you are so valued by people outside this building in terms of what you have contributed to the huge amount of work that's been going on, both you know, upstairs and in this chamber and from all the campaigners outside to try and make our streets into places that are fit for walking and cycling, safe, healthy, and all of those other good things. So, yes, the other thing I just wanted to say was, as the Deputy Mayor, sort of over this last 2 years, what you have shaped in that transport strategy is a tool that will help all of us in this chamber to hold the Mayor to account on his delivery and for making London into a better place. And, you know, that is incredibly valuable and, you know, really thank you for that. And I think just finally, I just want to say anyone who's been involved in a report called Feet First has to be a good thing. So thank you, Val.
Very good.
And Assemblymember Pigeon.
Thank you very much. Wow. I think I'm going to be saying some words that Val's leaving do in a couple of weeks, so I shall be coming up with some funny anecdotes for that. But and I've already been starting to think of those, so I shall be dredging my memory on that. But it's been a great privilege for 8 years that I shared chairing the Transport Committee with Val, and after 8 years chairing LFIPA, and I know from talking to Mike Tuffrey, the tough times that you all went through at that time, and very, very aggressive union behaviour and so on, and you managed that so well and so ably. But what I was really proud of was working with you, how we influenced and helped really improve policy and transport services in London from all modes. It wasn't just the big ones, the tubes and the trains, it was bus services, it was door-to-door services, that forgotten important service, looking at taxis and private hire, walking, motorcycle safety, access to people with disabilities, and particularly Val's passion, people with sensory impairment, something that hadn't been looked at before, really pushing the agenda on those issues and getting TfL and other operators to change their policies and their positions in those areas. Really, I think what changed is that we've made sure, and Val really embodied this, that we focus on passengers and people rather than the train sets, which actually on the Transport Committee we're all tempted to look at the train sets, and yes, we do some exciting site visits and we put on hard hats, but actually it's about the people, the passengers, and that's where Val came from on all of this and has been fantastic. And we also had a lot of fun over the 8 years on this as fellow Assembly members and Transport Committee members. But then Val becoming Deputy Mayor, you know, absolute joy for me, much harder for me, I have to say, to scrutinise someone who I consider to be a friend than actually, you know, Heidi beware, I have to say. But actually, what I have seen, and I'm sure we all have, is that those 8 years' work, how they have then gone into the Mayor's transport strategy, to actually read a strategy that's based on evidence that we had done over 8 years, as well as others, and seeing how the Assembly has influenced policy and the strategy for years to come. And, you know, I think Val's been very open with us as a Transport Committee, very open with us as an Assembly, very dynamic, and really understanding where we're coming from and trying to work with us to improve services for Londoners. And I think it'll be a hugely hard act to follow. And you know, we will watch with interest your successor in this role. But you've had a huge contribution to public life across London, and I really hope you enjoy your retirement with Mick. And we will miss you at City Hall. Thank you.
Do I get to say thank you, Chair?
Yes, please.
1 minute.
And I'll bring this over.
Well, I just, those were really lovely words. Thank you so much. You know, this purple carpet has seen a lot of wrestling and it's survived rather well. So there must be a genetic link there because, you know, I think I do feel to some extent that I'm going out on a high, and I really appreciate the kind comments you've made. It's absolutely true that I think the years I spent on the Assembly did prepare me for the task here, and I'm really glad that you've appreciated that, you know, what we've managed to deliver in the Mayor's Transport Strategy isn't just the mayoral manifesto, and that's a pretty thorough manifesto, but actually it is some of the collective learning we've gathered together from our scrutiny work here. And I kind of, I'm really glad you appreciate that's what we were trying to do. I've had to get around the country a little bit, and one of the things I feel very powerfully is that having a Greater London Authority, by which I mean the Mayor
and the Assembly and the functional bodies is a massive asset to London, and you can see how the rest of England struggles to deliver big strategic change and improvement for itself. It's not just about money, it's about actually having the capacity. And I think the Assembly is an absolutely vital part of that capacity. It is London understanding its own problems and scrutinising those issues in public together. I do think, despite my party political reputation, that the best scrutiny is cross-party, because it is cross-party, you get to the fundamentals and it gets very, very honest. We do all go a bit mad every 4 years, but in between times there's some really great sanity, there's some fantastic insights, I think, that this Assembly has discovered. It's been, I feel as though it has been a career, a lifetime well spent, and I'm glad you think so too. I will miss you all. It's with both terror and joy that I'm retiring, but I'm sure, you know, we will see each other again in different ways. But I do hope that you will always stand to defend the rights of the Assembly, because the Assembly really does matter. You know, I tried for a couple of parliamentary seats, and I do think, you know, in hindsight, it was a total blessing that I didn't get them. Because this was the place where you can make a really practical difference in the here and now. And, you know, I fear that too much modern politics is about positioning. Actually, real politics is about making people's lives better. And I think that's what we've all been doing at the GLA together. And I certainly feel it's one of the strongest appeals, Len, of London regional and local government to women, because it is a place where you can come in, put your ego aside and get on with doing some useful stuff. And I think we've done some really useful stuff together. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody. That was really lovely of you.
First time.
I am sorry I have to go. I've got to take Heidi to Westminster Council. So not quite finished yet. Thank you. Thank you very
Was that stopped? Should I have banged a hammer?
That's fine. No, we've got the motions still to do, so we would just extend the meeting.
Okay.
There's only three then.
Yes. Can I ask, please, that members extend the meeting in accordance with Standing Order 2.9 so we can deal with the rest of the agenda? Thank you very much. We've dealt with much of it already, so we're going straight now to motions. And the first motion is in the name of Assemblymember Copley.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm sure all of us around this horseshoe remember waking up to the horrifying images on the 14th of June last year of the Grenfell Tower fire. Horrifying images and the horror that something like this could have happened. And I think over the time since then, also the horror that it was probably a disaster that was avoidable. And I think that what Londoners want and what people across the country want is for the assurance that nothing like this will ever be allowed to happen again. And that is what the motion that I'm proposing today is about. So the motion calls on the Mayor and on the Chair of the Assembly to write to the Secretary of State calling on the government to reconsider the use of combustible and limited combustibility cladding and insulation on high-rise blocks. I think to many of us, certainly to myself, the idea that it was ever allowed for buildings to be wrapped in flammable plastic, I mean, it just seems to me to be an anathema that we would allow something like that to happen. We also call on the government to ensure that all the dangerous cladding is removed and replaced, and indeed to ensure, while we welcome the fact that the government has now said that they will compensate housing associations and councils for the removal and the replacement, to ensure that there is no cap on the compensation that will be offered. Ensuring as well the end of these desktop studies. Again, it's an anathema to me that we allowed manufacturers, or we allow, I should say, manufacturers of cladding to do their own tests and to certify themselves whether or not it is dangerous. And of course, last but by no means least, calling on the government to implement the recommendations contained within the report that was led on behalf of this Assembly by Assemblymember Czar into sprinklers, and I think that everyone around this horseshoe welcomed that report. As I said before, I think that this probably was an avoidable disaster, and we have to do whatever we can to ensure it doesn't happen again. I think one factor that led to this disaster taking place, sadly, has been some of the narrative, particularly in the media over many, many years, about so-called red tape and this kind of mocking attitude towards what is sort of deemed health and safety culture. I think we need to push back on that. I think we need, I actually believe that red tape saves lives, and we need to ensure that we have the proper regulation in place to ensure that nothing like this ever happens again.
Thank you. Assemblymember Bailey.
I very much wanted to second this motion, this very important motion. What happened in Grenfell almost a year ago now must not be allowed to happen again. The huge loss of life, the ongoing pain for the survivors and the devastation of their families, and the destruction of a local community of which I came from. I know the warmth and value of that community and the pain that has been left behind. I welcome the Prime Minister's commitment to fully fund the removal of flammable cladding from council and housing association property. I'm also pleased that the Secretary of State for the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government has pledged to consult on the banning of combustible materials used in building, despite the outcome of the Hackett review. I also fully support the recommendations by Assemblymember Shah and his report, Never Again. The list of recommendations from that report are extensive and focused and correct. And I plead with you to support this motion so we can get a full consensus and we can send a message to Londoners that we are prepared to act beyond our party political affiliations for the rights and protection of all Londoners. My colleague Tom said this was an avoidable disaster. I feel he is right. And we have to demonstrate and give the Mayor and the Chairman the full authority to write with all of our names to have these recommendations fully taken up. I come from the community where Grenfell is. I guarantee you they'll appreciate this support, and I can tell you they deserve this support. So I commend you, I ask you sincerely to support this motion.
Assemblymember Berry.
We all have Grenfell's lost residents and the continuing problems faced by survivors in our thoughts as the anniversary is reached. A year ago, it was a profound shock to our city and the whole country to see such horrors, and we're all saying horror, and that is completely right, unfold. My heart still breaks when I think of everyone who is reliving their losses and their trauma this month as we take part in commemorations. In our work, in our casework, as Assembly members and some of us as councillors as well, fire safety concerns were already often raised with us, even before Grenfell. Things like escape routes, fire doors, repairs, the state of common areas, electricity and gas work were often very controversial, and residents were seeking our help and citing fire safety there. But this cladding, the fitting of easily combustible material on the outside of buildings, was a new issue brought into light by this disaster. And it is a scandal, a huge mistake that needs to be put right, in practical terms, as soon as possible. The motion highlights that many Londoners are still living with this kind of cladding on their homes. And no one should be living at greater risk than is necessary. Now, even if towers with combustible cladding have removed their stay put advice, they put fire marshals in place, if they fix the fire doors inside, leaving this cladding in place still leaves them at greater risk than necessary, and it needs to be removed. So yes, the Prime Minister's promised to help councils and housing associations to get on with cladding replacement, but the money seems like nowhere near enough. My own borough of Camden has already spent tens of millions making repairs and removing cladding from our towers in the Chalcots estate affected by this issue, and more is needed to finish just that job. The motion therefore asks for no cap on the funding the government will provide, and this is the right demand for us to make. It also asks for an end to desktop studies and an end to the use of combustible cladding being allowed in high-risk buildings at all, and supports our existing recommendations and report, particularly to do with sprinklers. These are things we can already conclude are needed and are completely right. Using materials that can catch fire in this way and relying on the overall design of a system to protect people and on the perfect installation of these systems, which is what is going on at the moment, is far too risky. And it's our job in this chamber to stand up for Londoners as in all these kinds of ways. We are doing more on some of the other issues raised by Grenfell too, including reporting back from the Housing Committee our recommendations soon for including residents properly and managing their own homes. But meanwhile, this motion is important, and I hope we will pass it with a unanimous voice today.
Thank you very much. Assemblymember Pigeon.
Thank you very much. We've all been affected by Grenfell and across London, and I think across the whole country, and having seen that burnt out block in the sky, I think it haunts us all, and at the moment daily we're reliving it as the inquiry is giving detail after detail on the news. I think this motion, thank you Assembly Members Copley and Bailey for bringing it today and for your speeches on it. The motion makes very clear, sensible recommendations, including Assemblymember Shah's really good report pushing for sprinklers, which I know is something that's long been called for by many around this chamber. I fully support this, and I hope we can have unanimous support to campaign for these. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other speaker? Assemblymember Copley to sum up.
Thank you, Chair. Well, all I want to do is to thank all the speakers for what they have said. I entirely agree with it, and I am very hopeful the Assembly will pass this motion unanimously.
Can I put the motion, please? Those in favour, please show. You have unanimity. Thank you very much. Pass over the chair to Assemblymember Arnold.
Okay.
You don't have to bang the No, you're not have to call the motion.
Can I have the next motion on the order paper in the name of Assemblymember Pigeon?
Thank you very much. My motion is on the topic of Heathrow expansion, which has become rather a timely motion, but has a simple aim of reaffirming the London Assembly's long-standing opposition to a third Heathrow runway. And it was, of course, submitted before Tuesday's announcement, but the draft national policy statement already existed. And Tuesday's cabinet decision and the publication of the final national policy statement was bitterly disappointing for us all. But in many respects, it was the final confirmation of the direction of policy long set by the current Secretary of State for Transport and the government. But in bringing forward this motion, I thought it was really important to highlight some recent developments. And that's why, for example, I've got in the reference to the recent House of Commons Transport Committee work. And that committee raised fundamental questions which the government hasn't even started to answer. and the long-standing disagreement between TfL and the Department for Transport over the real cost of surface transport improvements to support a third runway must not be forgotten. It's underestimated by more than £10 billion. You couldn't, quite frankly, make it up. And a further area that has largely been overlooked is the future of lakeside energy from waste plant. This relatively new plant is right on the site where the third runway would be built. And at present, councils across West London send around 900,000 tonnes of waste there every year. But if there's anything more controversial than airport expansion, it's finding locations for waste sites across the country. But advocates of a third Heathrow runway seem to think, you know, this will just go away. This is actually a major, major issue. But the fundamental reasons for opposing a third runway are quite clear. A third runway will lead to 300,000 more people, many Londoners being affected by increased noise levels. It will lead to further increases in pollution when air pollution is already at illegal limits in areas surrounding the airport. And also, the arguments against the third runway are also almost about what kind of country we want to be. Yes, for the overseas owners of Heathrow who've paid very little in corporation tax in recent years, there are clear benefits for a third runway and more flight slots. But actually, despite spending millions of pounds on advertising, let us not forget that Heathrow speaks ultimately for themselves and not for UK PLC. Now, lots of myths that seem to me need to be demolished. There is spare air capacity if you look at airports in London and across the South East. This is especially the case when you start looking at High Speed 2 and how that will make Birmingham Airport a further option for many Londoners. Long-haul flights are possible from other airports, not just Heathrow. Stansted's already planning a huge increase in long-haul flights. Just this week, Emirates are starting to fly from Stansted to Dubai. And even City Airport has flights to places like Russia. And Justine Greening was absolutely right this week when she talked about the need for more point-to-point flights. And actually, hub airports is this outdated model. We heard this on the Transport Committee many years ago. It's an outdated model. More and more with newer planes, people fly point to point. The hub airport is not needed in the same way. And there is something odd, I think, in the UK, that 1/3 of the UK population lives in London and the South East, but 2/3 of flights are from London and the South East. That just does not make any sense. You know, the case for a third Heathrow runway has not been made. It has never been made. It will have a devastating impact on many people in terms of increased noise and air pollution. It will create a huge bill for the taxpayer, ultimately. It will reduce competition for passengers. And I really hope we can unanimously send a clear message today to this government and to Parliament that we do not support a third runway at Heathrow. No to expanding Heathrow. Please support this motion.
Can I have Assemblymember Cooper to second?
Thank you very much, Chair. I mean, I could just formally second this motion, but I feel very strongly about this issue. It has a massive impact on my constituency, and it's something that is very regularly raised with me on the doorstep and also by email. The impact in terms of the environmental consequences of this expansion. We've had Heathrow come and talk to the Environment Committee several times over the last 2 years, and we've dug into the details of what they've been saying to us about what the expansion might mean, what their current situation is. And the one thing that they've not really been able to properly explain to us, and my great disappointment with this announcement, is that I don't think the analysis is actually there to deal with the environmental consequences of the expansion at the airport. First of all, noise. Now, I think talking about the number of people who are currently affected, which is well over 500,000 people, coming up to almost 1 million Londoners in terms of noise. And one of the many questions that I asked them when they were in the Environment Committee was to say, well, can't the flights land later in the morning? Because we're talking about planes, really noisy planes, starting to come over from a very early period of time. Now, I'm sure Assemblymember Armour might comment on this in his remarks, but if anyone's had the pleasure of going to Kew Gardens, it's absolutely dreadful. And that just gives you the impression, and that's during the middle of the day, what people who live under those flight paths, and it runs all the way through Battersea and into Putney as well before they start to arrive at Heathrow. So starting the arrivals much later is something that Heathrow can't consider. Stopping the flights leaving at an earlier point in the evening is something they will consider, but of course they don't fly out so much over London. It's the arrivals coming in over London that creates the problem with noise. Caroline has just talked very eloquently about capacity elsewhere. I'm not really going to touch on that, but she has just mentioned the Lakeside Energy from Waste plant, which is part of our investigation into energy from waste and the circular economy. I visited last year, along with the Riverside plant and the Edmonton plant. And one of the problems with the expansion of Heathrow, if we're worried about finances, and I'm being constantly told that there is this issue that relates to austerity and the government, has no money really to spend on anything, many of them vital services being provided by local authorities, and yet we're talking about changing something that the cost of moving the Lakeside plant alone is the equivalent of doing the entire introduction of another runway at Gatwick. Now, I'm not particularly saying, let's expand Gatwick, but I'm just saying, what on earth is the point of pursuing a project that involves just one element is the same cost as the entire project somewhere else? That has to surely be lunacy. Why on earth are we pursuing a project that is so massively expensive? And the Lakeside plant, Caroline has pointed out, where else can those facilities go? And it's not just ordinary rubbish. They also have clinical waste that goes to Lakeside as well. And these are very difficult issues for us to deal with. But I've talked a bit about noise. What I haven't talked about is the particulate matter. I haven't talked about the CO2 emissions and the appalling impact on London's air quality. Now, when Heathrow came to talk to us, they had absolutely no answer at all to our questions about if you expand. Even with their current situation, it's very difficult for them to assist us in London in terms of meeting what we really need to do to stop Londoners dying and also having their health massively affected by what we now know are incredibly toxic fumes that come from vehicles. For most Londoners, to get to Heathrow takes a really long time unless you get a taxi or unless you go by car. And one of the other aspects that has really annoyed me about this expansion plan is the talk that is now coming out about expanding car parks for an extra 40,000 cars. Well, they're clearly not really aiming to see most travellers coming there on the very insufficient public transport system if they feel the need to expand car parks by 40,000 vehicles. The amount of additional pollution that will come from people going to the newly expanded airport has just not been dealt with at all in terms of their comments. So I think because of the failure to deal with the environmental consequences in terms of noise, CO2 emissions, particulate matter, NOx, in terms of the capacity elsewhere, the cost, the sheer cost of this project, I hope you support the motion, and I'm very pleased to second it. Thank you.
Thank you. Members have in front of them an amendment to this motion. So I'll call upon the mover of the amendment, Assemblymember Arbour.
Of course, we've heard all of this before, many times. I've probably heard it many times longer than most of you here. And constantly, we have just talked about things. I went to the proposer of this motion. I did say to Assemblymember Pigeon, we really ought to talk about acting. This motion talks about noting. It talks about acknowledging. It talks about reiterating. Well, I'd be absolutely terrified if I was a minister, if I was involved in the decision making and someone comes to me and simply says, well, do you note this? Do you acknowledge this? Do you accept the reiteration? The time really has come for us to actually show that we possibly have some teeth. And this motion, this amendment has been framed to say that we should actually take some kind of action, that we should actually do something. And I would suggest to you that we do have it within our remit to be able to really have a go at this, to set down, as I have indicated, ways in which we are able to prevent the implementation of this really preposterous scheme, which everybody has acknowledged for as long as I can remember will damage the health and the environment of Londoners. Let us consider every single committee, how they can possibly affect this decision. For example, it could be scrutinised through the Budget Committee. The Budget Committee, and I took some pleasure in seeking ways of using alliteration to describe how each committee could deal with it. The Budget Committee could bludgeon the proposal. The Environment Committee could eviscerate the proposal. The Housing Committee could harry them on the proposal. And you can do this right the way through every single one of our committees because it impacts on what Londoners do. And by us doing this, and by us actually putting committee resources and putting the research resources... I'm sorry, Len. Oh, I see. I thought you were threatening. I thought you were threatening me, Len. Well, you've almost thrown me off my stride, but you haven't. What I'm saying to you is this: that we as an assembly can actually put a spoke in the wheel of this proposal. The one thing that has been the failure of government and successive governments is the belief that somehow or another this scheme will one day be implemented. We know that it cannot possibly meet the various tests that there are, particularly in relation to pollution. And we need to say to government, we are going to be in a position to delay you on this. We are going to be in a position to demonstrate that your decision is wrong and there does need to be some kind of alternative. You will note that I have put in the motion that we do need the support of the Mayor. The Mayor is the man who actually is in a position, I would suggest, to put his foot on the throat of this proposal. This cannot possibly go through without the support of the agencies at the Mayor's command, particularly Transport for London. And secondly, the resources which the Mayor has to put into this. Now, over the years, you will know that I have questioned what various mayors will do on this. The current mayor has indicated that he would provide resources for the judicial reviews which are being taken out by the London boroughs which are opposed to this scheme. You will recall that the court said that they couldn't start on this judicial review until a decision has been taken. I suspect that the decision has been taken. I'm no doubt it will be confirmed, and that is the time that those resources need to come in. So what I am asking is that, firstly, it will do us a lot of good. It will demonstrate that we are more than a talking shop, that we are actually going to do something. Secondly, we can work shoulder to shoulder with the Mayor on something that will benefit all Londoners. And thirdly, we'll stop it. Thank you very much.
Can I call upon Assemblymember Bacon to second the amendment?
Thank you, Madam Vice Chairman. I rise, I think, more in sorrow than anger to second this amendment. Now, I know it's not a universally accepted idea that we need to increase aviation capacity in and around London. I, however, agree with that sentiment. I believe that it's vital for our long-term economic well-being that we do so. So the question of how we increase aviation capacity has been a question on the table for many, many, many years. It's the right question in my opinion, but a third runway at Heathrow is not by any shape or form the right answer, simply because Heathrow is in the wrong place. You might get a third runway in there eventually. You wouldn't get a fourth or a fifth. The possibility of expanding Heathrow any further than this, even if this runway goes through, is remote to say the least. Now, an important factor to think about is that in the entirety of Europe, 1/3 of the people who are adversely impacted by aviation noise are adversely impacted by Heathrow in its current form. And as we heard when Assemblymember Pigeon and Cooper opened this debate, that number is going to increase by hundreds of thousands if a third runway is built. We heard from Assemblymember Cooper about how you get to and from Heathrow in its current form, and the fact that the transport links to it make travelling there by public transport very difficult or very expensive or both. Expanding Heathrow Airport is not going to make that any easier. It's going to make it significantly worse. And we also know from studies that were conducted previously into this subject that a third runway at Heathrow won't actually improve our market share of aviation. It will simply slow the rate of decline. It is not even the most ambitious option that could be on the table. It's formidably expensive, almost twice the cost, according to the Department of Transport's own figures. It's going to be almost twice the cost of, say, a second runway at Gatwick, and it would deliver less value to the economy than a second runway at Gatwick. It is the wrong decision. It's in the wrong place. We can't do this. This motion is very, very timely. I think the amendment that's been moved by Assemblymember Arbour is not meant to emasculate the original motion. It's meant to beef it up, and that's why it's here. Now, I would offer the assurance that if we don't agree this amendment, then we will be voting for the original motion. It's important that we give a strong message to the government. They've made a wrong turn here, and we need to set them back onto the right path before it is too late.
Okay, thank you. Now we've got speakers. I've got 4 speakers so far that I'll call upon, and you speak either to the motion in front of you or to the amendment, and then we'll go to the vote on the amendment, and then if that falls, we then go to the vote on the motion as tabled. So, can I call upon Assemblymember Prince, please?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Chair. I'm not going to repeat all the facts and figures that have been very ably used by my colleagues. I just want to make 2 very simple points, really. Firstly, that this is a completely incomprehensible decision made by the government. This will not only affect adversely people who live in the West, but also my constituents in Havering and Redbridge. Often members or residents from my area come and complain to me about the noise of London City Airport and the planes flying over their houses. More often than not, it's actually the planes that are stacking, waiting to find a slot in Heathrow. So this does make no sense to me whatsoever. The other point I'd like to make very quickly is, if we believe that London needs a hub airport, because there's 2 choices, there's hub or there's competition. If we believe London needs a hub airport, Heathrow is not the answer. We might squeeze in a 3rd runway, as my colleagues have said, but we certainly won't have a 4th or a 5th. If, on the other hand, we believe competition is the answer for London, Heathrow isn't the answer. So, whichever way you look at it, Heathrow is not the answer. I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Assemblymember Russell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Green Group has consistently opposed any expansion at Heathrow, or any other airport for that matter. Assemblymember Berry and I are happy to support this motion, reiterating the Assembly's long-standing opposition to a 3rd runway at Heathrow. We will also be on the campaign trail with Assemblymember Arbour. The government's announcement this week of their final national policy statement backing a 3rd runway is devastating news for communities across London, as all Assembly members will be aware. People living under the flight paths and along the airport access routes see a bleak future of exposure to even more noise, sleep deprivation, congestion and pollution. And this just looks like the government is putting the interests of big business, of Heathrow, ahead of the health and well-being of Londoners and all those children who are growing up under flight paths with actual noise shelters in their playgrounds. If the government was genuinely open-minded in their consultation and had considered the evidence submitted, the case for a 3rd runway would have been rejected outright on the grounds of noise, air pollution and climate change, as other people like Assemblymember Cooper have already said. On noise, we've got the noise from the flights using Heathrow already damages the lives of over 700,000 London residents. That's more than 3 times as many people as any other European airport. Night and early morning flights disturb people's sleep. Children's performance at school is affected, and people say it's really hard to concentrate or hear what people are saying as planes pass overhead. A third runway would mean at least another 200,000 Londoners will have their lives permanently affected by noise misery. And there's no way expansion should even be on the table when air pollution in Heathrow already exceeds legal limits. Yet the government wants us to believe that somehow, by adding 700 extra planes a day with a third runway, they will still be able to meet their air pollution limits, despite its own analysis showing exactly the opposite. And to be clear, expansion will increase local breaches of air pollution and delay bringing London's pollution within legal limits. And the additional surface access car journeys generated by the third runway will not only hit our economy through increased congestion, but will also put pressure on NHS budgets. A report released this week by Global Action Plan shows that the health cost to society of each car on the road in London over its lifetime is £8,000. There's a lot of extra NHS cost that's going to be coming from this additional surface access. And then on climate change. The government has chosen to ignore the impact of building a third runway on our ability to meet the UK's carbon targets. Their modelling is based on as yet unproven technologies like electric planes and some incredibly optimistic decarbonisation assumptions in other sectors of the economy. Climate change is the biggest threat to all aspects of our lives and our children's lives. This reckless expansion undermines the Paris Climate Change Agreement and ignores the scale of action that is needed now, today, and over the next decade to have any chance of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. If the government was really serious about supporting jobs and investment, it will be showing real climate change leadership and asking other nations to do the same. That means containing aviation at current levels, investing in less carbon-intensive travel options, like trains, to free up existing airport capacity and use what we have better. So there are no words strong enough to condemn this terrible Heathrow decision. Chris Grayling failed even to mention climate change in his announcement. I'm quite sure that there will be serious legal challenges on environmental and other grounds, and we must all keep fighting to make sure that this terrible plan that will affect so many Londoners so badly will never materialise. Now, apart from the work that all our committees are going to be doing, I'm really looking forward to the Environment Committee eviscerating this decision. Successive mayors, the London Assembly and millions of Londoners have consistently opposed expansion at Heathrow. And this included the former Mayor of London, Boris Johnson, who I understand is, as we speak, preparing to lie down in front of the bulldozers. I am very happy to join him, and I hope other Assembly members, particularly from Mr Johnson's party, will join us too.
He's off on holiday.
Assemblymember Duval.
Others have spoken eloquently about the reasons why we should support this motion. I want to address the issues around the amendment because I think it's a very important amendment and I would have hoped we would have been able to support it. We can't support it partly because it rips out the guts of the previous motion, and I accept the assurances of what others have spoken earlier on. If the last 2 paragraphs of the amendment were just added to the motion rather than replaced, I think that would have been acceptable. Somehow, in terms of the conversations, that did not happen. And, so I say that, as it exists at the moment, we will be opposing the amendment, but not because we disagree with those particularly last 2 points of the paragraph, which could have just been simply added to the original motion. So unless, Chair, there is a movement of change on that, if people want that, then our position will remain the same, but it's not out of any hostility towards the group, but it's the intention to the way it was done. So the last 2 points of your amendment, we certainly could have supported if it was just added to the original amendment.
If the original mover is willing to accept that, then we will happily incorporate the amendment.
Can I ask the original mover, Assemblymember Pigeon?
Are willing to agree that, of course, I'm very happy to, if it's added to my motion.
Okay, so members, it seems that we have agreement, and that I'm happy to go with you if you're clear that you understand what we're doing. We are going to add the amendment, the paragraphs of the amendment to the end of the motion as tabled.
Why don't you just add and? Just add and.
So where we read third runway at Heathrow Airport, we amend that and say, and the Assembly resolves that. In the light of this fundamental objection to this, we will campaign to prevent its implementation. Is the mover happy with that?
Happy with that.
Thank you.
As I was
And all that will be tidied up. We still, that was a bit of a timeout. So, Assemblymember Boff.
Very quickly, Deputy Chair. I have some experience of this as being leader of Hillingdon Council at the time. Now, you've got to realise that in Hillingdon doesn't get the noise. If the economic arguments were real, then Hillingdon Council would be backing the expansion of Heathrow. They are not real. The economic arguments are not real. They do not benefit the London Borough of Hillingdon. And every leader, all my predecessors and all my successors in the London Borough of Hillingdon have opposed this expansion. But what gets up our goat is this, is that the Heathrow Airport for many years have been debating with us, and we had been debating them being nice. And they promised us at the time, I can remember the words still ringing in my ears, if you give us the 5th terminal, we will not go for a 3rd runway. Now, quite frankly, you know, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. We've done nice, now we should do nasty.
Wow.
And I actually think that there should be, and this is the difference between the amendment, and I very much appreciate, it's a bit of a camel of emotion now, but I very much appreciate that it's been incorporated, because the difference is that I now think that TfL should be instructed to have no meetings whatsoever with any of the implementation team for this at all. I think the GLA officers, all GLA officers, should be instructed not to reply to any letters that are about the implementation of this process. The Mayor should do the same to the government and the implementation team, as he's done to the Nighttime Commission, and that is never meet them. And we should ensure that being the minister responsible for the implementation of this would be a poison chalice and the most unpleasant experience for any minister in government. This, we've done nice. We've been doing nice for decades. Now is the time to get nasty, because Londoners do not want this. The more you know about the expansion, the more you realise it doesn't work. From those who oppose airport expansion and from those who support airport expansion, we all agree this does not work. Let's be nasty.
Well-deserved round of applause there. Okay, we come to summation. Call upon Assemblymember Arbour.
I endorse everything that Assemblymember Boff has said. To the barricades, friends.
To the barricades. Summation, Assemblymember Pigeon.
I've got unanimity around a motion, and it's now us putting all our committee resources and others behind this to make sure we do everything we can to stop this expansion.
Okay, so members, we are now voting on the motion as altered by the mover, Assemblymember Pigeon. Can I see those in favour of that motion? And there's unanimous support. Thank you very much.
Okay. No, there's a final motion which I'll do. And the final motion on the agenda is in the name of Assemblymember Berry. Meow.
This final motion, which I'll do as quickly as I can, I've been trying to put this for ages, and there's really no point in waiting for a week when there isn't any big news to do it. But it's a simple change. We should definitely back this. It's to help clear up a small injustice faced by our many pet cats. We've got 313,000 cats living with us in London, and you only have to look at Twitter for about 2 minutes to see how brilliant they are. I'm biased, but I think living with a cat, in fact any pet, is really great, and it's good for you on a population and a public health level as well. It improves your mental health, it reduces your stress and anxiety. And the problem highlighted in this motion is something I wasn't aware about until alerted to it by the campaigners Cats Matter. When my cat went missing, I assumed the microchip would mean that if anybody found it, it would be scanned and I would be told what happened. But no, I was wrong. I mean, luckily my cat came back, soaking wet, 3 days later. It was fine. But many, many owners lose their cats and do not find out what happened because there's no rule that says councils, anyone who finds their dead cat needs to scan it to see what has happened. In fact, cats have the same status as squirrels when they should have the same status as dogs. So this is asking councils to get their street cleaning teams to scan any cats they find. It asks for consistency from councils. Some London councils, Kensington and Chelsea notably, are already doing it. And to get consistency from a change in the law and for us to write to the Mayor and the councils to ask for this to happen. So I really hope you'll support it. It's a tiny thing, but I think it makes a big difference to lots of Londoners and particularly to lots of cats. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Assemblymember O'Connell.
As the in-house Dr. Doolittle, I very happy, and a cat owner, I very happily second it and hope everyone will support it.
Assemblymember Dismore.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I mean, I'm surprised we're debating something like this in the Assembly. But I'm even more surprised about the Greens, because I always thought the Greens were interested in preserving the natural environment. And there's nothing here about the 275 million birds and small mammals which cats kill every year. Nor is there anything in here about what can be done by cat owners to try and reduce this, well, I've heard it called a genocide of the birds, but I wouldn't call it that. I just call it an absolute massacre. And it may well be that Ms Berry is interested in her cat, but equally I'm interested in the birds in my garden and the risks they face. Some things can be done quite simply. Sir David Attenborough, that great luminary, says, why don't you just fit a bell collar on your cat? The RSPB makes similar suggestions and also suggests that cats could be kept inside for an hour after sunrise and an hour before sunset, which is when birds are more active feeding. So if the Greens are serious about the natural environment, I think not just talking about cats getting run over, which obviously nobody wants to see, I would be very surprised indeed that they should actually be doing something about the impact on our wildlife. Cats are born killers. They kill 275 million animals and birds a year. The RSPB say that just fitting a collar would save 41% of those birds that are killed every year. So why, I don't know if Sian Berry has a bell collar on her cat, but if she hasn't, she should do. I don't know if she keeps her cat in when birds are active, but if she isn't, she should do. And follow all the other recommendations of the RSPB, which I won't go through now, because there are quite a few of them.
Okay. Would you like to sum up?
Oh no, we'll go to the vote.
No, we want to have lunch.
No, stop.
Not against bell collars. All the points you make are quite valid, actually.
Your cat got a bell?
But I worry slightly that you sounded a little bit like you might be against cats. So I hope the Assembly as a whole will stay
Has
in
your cat
favour
got
of
a
this
bell?
motion and vote for it.
Has your cat
Because
got a bell?
I want my
That will do. That will do.
really great, and we should be
Those in
giving them the same
favour
status as
of
dogs.
those
Thank
in
you.
favour of the motion, please
You
show.
should be told, has your cat got a bell?
Everyone in favour?
Even
Even the Assemblymember Dismal. Even the Assemblymember
Okay,
Dismal.
thank you very much, and that's the end of business, isn't it? Okay, date of next meeting is going to be the 5th of 21st of June. Thank you very much.
I want to go downstairs. Sorry.
That's okay. Okay.